I'm David Scandura.
And I'm Justus Burkett.
And today we're here to find out, is About Time the greatest movie ever made?
Oh, Christ, 2 losers in one house.
Welcome to The Greatest Movie Ever Made, the show where we watch a movie and tell you if it's the greatest movie ever made. A movie that is so thoroughly entertaining and compelling that while you're watching it, it's the only thing that matters in the world. I'm David Scandura. I'm joined by my co-host and time-traveling ginger, Justus Burkett.
Can I be a ginger when I have no hair on my head?
That's a good point.
Is a ginger still a ginger if it's only facial hair?
I don't know.
People do call me a ginger, even though I am bald. Even though I've been rocking the shaved head for a few years now, people, when the beard grows out, they do call me a ginger. So I think that's the majority opinion, I guess. I don't think of myself as a ginger because it's there's just nothing up there.
I have memories of you in college with curly red hair, so sometimes you still appear in my mind's eye in that way.
If we're going by what I got downstairs, ginger is definitely the situation.
I did not know that.
The Podmaster is very mad at me. Sorry, we just had a very frustrating remote record setup because this is our first time with a guest on this podcast, and we're fucking morons and we don't know what we're doing. So the energy in the room is very silly right now. Well, it's silly on my end. I was just saying before we started recording that I feel very silly right now, and I think David wants to put his fist through a wall.
It's a mixture of silliness and pure untethered hostility.
Yeah, so if I'm talking about my pubes and how red they are, that's why.
We should introduce our guest.
We should.
It's about time that we finally had a guest on this podcast.
But the Podmaster, I can't tell whether she liked that or not. She is grimace. Oh, she's giving a thumbs up. So it's a grimace of pain with a thumbs up.
Okay. We are joined by our longtime friend and host of the CTRL Group RPG podcast, Dennis Verrett.
Whoa!
Yay!
This was so easy, and this all came together very naturally, and we're on time, is what I would like to say.
It's so smooth. Well, we're happy to have you here, Dennis. We're happy to be talking to you voice to voice because most of our interactions, as we were kind of talking about before we started recording, have been via Twitter, or I guess X now.
Yeah.
For the last several years. So it's good to see you, buddy, and it's good to hear your voice.
Good to see you all. Yeah.
You're looking good. You're sounding good.
Thank you. I'm, however, exhausted. Because like I said, this started on time, and it's just wonderful. It's wonderful to be here.
and it's not like there's a 3-hour time difference between us or anything.
Exactly. We are all in the same time zone.
Don't worry, Dennis. After the extremely painful and awkward 1-hour setup, we're only going to take 2 more hours of your time talking about this movie. Then I promise you can go to bed.
I'm giving you 2 minutes of content, and then I'm dipping.
The guest is just I'm out.
It's a good movie. All right.
We were speculating because there was a snafu where we weren't all on the Zoom link at the beginning. We were speculating that you had volunteered to be on our podcast and selected this movie, and then just were gonna no-show us and just be I just wanted them to watch the movie. I don't actually want to be on this podcast.
It's honestly how I feel about the movie. I tried to show it to as many people as possible.
Well, you successfully got David and I to watch it. David, who has been conspicuously silent because the Podmaster is making faces and fiddling with dials, and David is concerned. So
I'm on red alert for this whole operation to collapse like a house of cards at any moment.
It's fine. We're just going to keep powering through.
Okay.
If ultimately this doesn't end up being recorded at all, at least we'll have had a good conversation with a couple of friends.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
Nice little
What's
hangout
happening?
sesh.
What are you pointing at? I don't understand. Oh, it is recording. Okay. Anyway, so Dennis, at the top of the show, David and I like to do a little thing where we kind of check in with each other and also talk about kind of what we've been enjoying in media, so like TV, but also movies, music, podcasts, whatever. Also, this is the part of the show where my dogs have decided to guest on the podcast and just start barking a bunch. As long as it doesn't get too overwhelming, we're just going to power through it. But anyway, you're our guest. I figured we could start with you.
Oh.
How are you doing, man?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing good. As I mentioned, what was off mic, but was on mic for several times that we hit record and clapped before this. It's been a long week for me. It's been it's all good things. This just like, I don't do a lot of things. And then this week I had something to do every single day. You would hope this was the cap off, like, greatest movie ever made, and then I get to rest for the weekend. But no, I'm doing Riot Fest tomorrow. I coach volleyball because I'm a teacher, so I've got a volleyball game to coach tomorrow.
Damn,
I want to sleep.
Busy man. And what about like what you've been enjoying in media recently? Like, have you seen any movies that you want to recommend? Listen to any albums? What you been enjoying?
Yeah, so I, like the big weeb I am, checked out with the live action One Piece on Netflix.
I have heard people saying that they were afraid for that to come out.
Yeah, every live action anime you think is gonna be terrible. There's no way you can encapsulate all of the goofiness and the charm that goes into Japanese animation sometimes. But this cast, and I think this was handled with a lot of care for a series, so much so that like I went back to the anime. I was like very off and on of the anime because it's up to like over 1,000 episodes now, but I got the charm, I got the bug, it bit me, and it was done well enough that like I'm like 4 arcs into One Piece now.
Nice. Well, I'm glad it wasn't like a huge disappointment.
Yeah.
Awesome. So David, what about you? How are you, man?
I'm good. I recently was cast in my first theater production since college. It'll be my first time being on stage in close to 10 years.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
At Flagstaff Shakespeare Festival's production of Two Noble Kinsmen, which Justus is involved with. From the production side, he's not acting in the show.
Yeah, I'm not in the show, but I've mentioned before I'm on staff for them, and I'm the production manager. That's my role there.
Yeah. Justus said, "We need someone, and I am begging you." And
I was like, "Please, we need a local. I can't house another actor."
Yeah. I had a really busy weekend last weekend because I went to Justus and I both saw Swans in Phoenix, and then I had to drive back and do work the next day, and then I had a powerlifting competition, and they needed the audition as soon as possible. So in between other people lifting at the powerlifting competition, I was out back on my phone looking up a monologue to rehearse to audition with. And yeah, so that's been a new experience for me, and I'm pretty busy and tired now too. All of a sudden, Justus and I saw Swans in Phoenix last Thursday. One of the most incredible shows I've ever seen in my life, and it inspired me to check out the Swans documentary, Swans: Where Does a Body End?, which I had seen before, but I rewatched it. And it is a long, epic, really well put together documentary that I think contextualizes and puts into words what makes Swans such a compelling and incredible musical experience, as well as anything could, I think. And I think it would be great if people are listening who haven't listened to Swans, and you have 2 hours and 45 minutes to kill. It's free on Tubi, which is great. Shout out to Tubi.
But if
we're not sponsored by them, but we could be.
we
if
should
you're listening to be.
Hopefully, eventually, we will be. If you have 2 hours and 45 minutes free, please listen to one of our episodes. But if you have another 2 hours and 45 minutes free, then watch the Swans documentary.
Yeah, it's a really good documentary, and an incredible show.
Yeah.
So that's been the big thing that I've been enjoying recently is Swans, their music, and that documentary. What about you, Justus?
I've been this has been sort of a rough week for me. I had like a week off, and then this was my first week like back at work and back at everything, and it's just been like production manager for the Shakespeare Festival has been crazy this week. Day job has been crazy this week. I have had so little motivation to do literally anything. I mentioned on a previous episode, I'm like back in therapy and I was talking to my therapist this week and I was like, man, like, I just don't want to do any of this shit. Like it was like one of those weeks, you know? But it's Friday now and I'm feeling a little bit better. I really enjoyed last week seeing Swans with David. I echo everything he said about that show. It was fucking incredible. And then the next night, the Podmaster is a very, very big Ghost fan, the band Ghost. I also like their music. I'm not like a super fan like the Podmaster is, but I like them and enjoy them a lot. And we went to see Ghost the night after Swans, and that fucking ruled. They put on such an amazing show, and you know, it's like they're huge now. Like they've gotten so much like fame and attention that they have like huge budgets at their shows now. So it's like they got like the fireworks and the pyrotechnics and the whole 9 yards. It's like a real spectacle, and it was like super fun. I really, really enjoyed that. And then their opener was actually the death metal band Amon Amarth. And they ruled too. There was like literally like a Viking sword fight happening on stage where they were like hitting each other with like real metal swords and like shields were being splintered and broken apart. And then they were like throwing pieces of the broken shield into the crowd. It fucking ruled so hard. It was so good. Those shows were like a definite highlight since our last record. And kind of a thing that I'm looking back on is like a bright spot that then led to like a sort of rough week, you know. but yeah, and like as far as like other stuff I've been enjoying in media, I did want to call out that Tyler Childers, one of my favorite country artists, has a new album called Rustin' in the Rain. And if you're interested in country music, or even if you're not, like I would recommend giving it a listen. It's like really classic country. He's like doing a Hank Williams thing there. It's an album with a lot of like love songs on it. I think he's in a really solid relationship right now, and it's like coming through in his music, which speaks to me as someone who loves my wife. So it's been a good kind of like positive presence in my life this last week or so, listening to that album a few times since it came out, I think on like the 8th. So it's only been out for a week or so, but yeah, I would recommend giving it a listen if you haven't. So and
to echo Justus's comments on Tyler Childers, I have not heard that new album yet, but if you're one of those people, if you're listening to this podcast, you're one of those people that's like, I hate country music. This is really good country music.
He's a good entry point for sure.
It is a good entry point. Someone introduced him to me literally this week, a couple days ago, and I was like, yeah, this kind of fucks.
Yeah, definitely has more in common with classic country than any of the shit you'll hear on the radio these days.
Exactly. Yeah, and his like early stuff's a little bit more like bluegrass, and then he goes a little bit more like in an outlaw country direction, and now he's doing more like the Hank Williams like kind of big band classic country thing, and it's all good. He's good at all of it. So yeah. Anyway, but we're not here today to do a podcast on Tyler Childers. We are here today to do a podcast about a movie that Dennis picked for us. This is going to be the thing. So Dennis is our first guest. We haven't had a guest on the show yet. But our thing with guests is that they pick the movie, right? So David and I, when we asked Dennis to be on the pod, well, we didn't ask, the Podmaster
did.
Because she does all of the hard work and we're just two fucking dumbasses with the microphones. But the movie that Dennis selected for his episode is the 2013 romantic comedy About Time. So that's what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah. So this would be a bit of our background section where we talk about the making of the movie and what our relationship is to the movie or the director. So I'll turn it over to you, Dennis. Like, what's your story with this movie? How did you first come to it?
Yeah, this story has always been a part of my romantic life. When like a past partner had shown me it, and they're like, "Oh, I can't believe you've seen this movie." And every time I bring it to new people, I'm like, "I can't believe you've seen this movie," because it's how good it is. And I honestly I use it as a move when I'm dating a new person. I'm like, all right, I got to see how you ugly cry, so I'm gonna show you About Time. And then once you're ugly crying, I'm there to pick up the pieces afterwards. So that's the move with the movie. It's an integral part of my game, actually.
I love that.
I'm ruthless without About Time.
The last date movie I think I showed someone was The Lighthouse, and it was more like, I'm just gonna watch The Lighthouse, and if you want to come over and watch it with me. But I want to watch The Lighthouse.
I think the version of that I've experienced in my life is, I think the Podmaster exercised her game a little bit on me, which was to just expose me to every single like male manipulator movie that's out there, you know? Because like I hadn't seen like Fight Club or like Train Spotting or like any of that shit when the Podmaster and I met. Like Donnie Darko is another one. And she was like, "You haven't seen these movies?" And she just like made me watch like all of them. So I think that was her version of that. She was like, oh, this is like a white boy who hasn't seen any of this white boy shit. I'm gonna like really hit him. I'm gonna
that's that's essentially the move I'm going with. I'm like,
right,
you're a female presenting person, you haven't seen About Time, you're gonna love this shit.
It's genius. So like, when did you first see this movie, Dennis? Did you see it when it came out, or like when did you discover it?
No, I did not. I think this is a big sleeper hit. Like, everyone I talked to has not seen this movie. I was the person who did not see this movie when it first came out, did not give it the love it so deserved when it first came out. I saw it possibly in like 2015. Was the first time I saw it.
Yeah, because this had a $12 million budget and made $87 million at the box office.
So like a moderate hit.
Yeah, I think it had like a limited run in America. It's apparently like kind of a surprise hit in South Korea, which I found interesting. It like is pretty popular over there. This is my first Richard Curtis movie other than Love Actually. And I say that because the only time I've seen Love Actually was when I was younger and I was on some kind of vacation with my parents and we were sharing the same hotel room and it was on the TV as I was falling asleep. And I was like trying to pretend that I was asleep so I could see boobs.
Classic.
Are there boobs in Love Actually?
There's boobs in Love Actually. I don't remember whose boobs though. That's the.
There's no boobs in.
I know Keira Knightley's in this.
There's no boobs in About Time.
Okay,
there's
Google,
almost boobs in About Time.
Whose boobs are in Love Actually?
I'll have to go back just to watch it again just to know whose boobs you get to see.
I'm sure if you Google Love Actually boobs, 15,000 results will come up where it's like the most disgusting Mr. Skin pages you've ever seen.
Yeah.
Is the Podmaster doing live research?
I'm also
she is Googling phone. Love Actually boobs. Apparently, there's a thumbs down. I don't know what that means. Bad boobs, no boobs, not sure. We'll clarify later. But yeah, so similar, David, to you, I don't have a big history with Richard Curtis. He hasn't directed very many movies.
Yeah.
I've never seen Love Actually.
Mm-hmm.
But what I know him from is writing Mr. Bean and Blackadder to British television programs.
Yeah, he's primarily a writer, and I discovered that he is quite involved with the Mr. Bean media universe.
Which really made me wish that Mr. Bean showed up. Well, he kind of does.
A little
because
bit.
the uncle in this movie is sort of Mr. Bean.
He's Mr. Bean.
I also was surprised to find out he wrote Steven Spielberg's War Horse.
Okay, that's a movie I have never seen
yeah,
and probably
but-
never will.
But this is his third movie. He also directed Love Actually and The Boat Who Rocked, and it sounds like this is probably going to be his last directorial feature. But he's still continuing to write and be involved in the industry that way. So I think we should just get into the movie.
Yeah, let's dive into it.
Yeah. So we're introduced to Tim's family. Tim, played by the great Domhnall Gleeson.
You say the great Domhnall Gleeson. I agree.
Yeah.
Dennis, how do you feel about Domhnall Gleeson?
I think it is the great Domhnall Gleeson as well.
Okay.
He had a bit of like a streak there where it was like Domhnall Gleeson's getting cast in a lot of things.
Yeah, he had a
Yeah.
big moment. He was like in like Oscar stuff, like Brooklyn around the same time that he was like doing Star Wars. Like he had like a big few years for sure.
Yeah.
But this is kind of before his like really big few years.
Yeah, I think this was
Right.
like a big pop off for him because also in 2013 is his Black Mirror episode that released.
Oh yeah. Which is one of the best ones.
Yes, it's one of my favorites as well.
Yeah. Okay, so we're on the same page.
We're on Team Domhnall Gleeson.
Yeah.
and
So
he is great in this movie.
he rules. He's so good in this
He's
movie.
so
He's
good.
so charming in this movie, which I think is vital for reasons that we'll get to later.
Yep.
We meet his dad, played by Bill Nighy, who
Bill,
is
motherfucking
Fucking
also great.
Nighy.
This
Oh
is,
my god,
this is
he's
my
so good in this
favorite
movie.
role. This is my
Yes.
favorite Bill Nighy role. You said charming
Yes.
for Domhnall Gleeson in this movie. I have never seen a man more charming than Bill Nighy.
Yeah.
In
1,000%. Like from the first moment he steps on screen. Literally my second note, and I barely took any, is just Bill motherfucking Nighy. Because I was like, he's so charming, he's so charismatic. He like fills the screen. He's like so vivacious and so full of life, and I want him to be my dad.
He's such a cool dad.
Such
he
a
just
great
like he's always there to play table tennis and have a chat with you and go down to the beach and watch movies. Like he's so cool, and like he always has this very like naturalistic effortlessness to his performances, but it's so well developed here.
Yeah, you get a really good sense of this guy from like the first scene, right? And the character feels really consistent throughout. Like it feels like he really tapped into this guy, you know.
Yeah, something I would also like to quickly just note on as we're going through the beginning of this movie is that when we're being introduced to these characters, it is Domhnall Gleeson's character of Tim narrating his family in the beginning. And I believe this is some of the best flowery prose narration for characters. Like my first note when the movie begins is him describing his mother. Mom was obtuse, rectangular, sturdy.
Yeah.
Which is just such a very solid, and he does the same for when he's describing Bill Nighy's character.
Yeah, and when he's talking about his sister, I don't remember the exact line, but it's something like she was like this like a wild thing.
Yes.
You know, like a thing of nature,
Yes.
sort of.
Right. She's kind of this sort of free spirit, and he says something like, and it seems like maybe he's going to. You would expect him to cast her in maybe somewhat of a negative light, but he says something like, "She's like my most favorite thing in the world," or something like that. Like it's a very, I love this intro. It endears you to the film right away with how he's introducing these characters and the dynamic that they have. The mom, played by Lindsay Duncan, Uncle Desmond, played by Richard Cordry, who is kind of a lovable. Kind of in his own little world. It's implied throughout the movie that he has some sort of cognitive issues or memory issues. I can't tell if he actually does or if he's just messing with people because they never really address it.
Right. I also sort of have thoughts about this that we'll get into when we get to the thing in this movie.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
I got a note for that too.
Right.
And then Kit Kat, played by Lydia Wilson.
Yes.
who's
Kit
his
Kat
sister.
is the sister. Yeah.
Yeah. So he introduces us to their life, you know, watching movies, hanging out on the beach, that sort of thing. Our first major scene is the New Year's party, where Tim is super fucking awkward, and Kit Kat meets her boyfriend Jimmy kind of in the background, and he'll have a larger role later in the movie. And Tim is just they get that countdown to New Year's. He's standing next to this girl that is clearly into him, and bro just completely fumbles, crashes and burns, and doesn't go in for the kiss.
Yeah, a thing that we get about Tim's character very, very early on is that he is not great with the ladies. He feels very insecure. He feels very awkward. He's clearly like, a good sensitive guy, but has a little bit of trouble coming out of his shell, right? Is the thing that's established very, very early on. Also here, we get the Mr. Brightside needle drop.
Yes.
Because we are at a New Year's Eve party in England, and it's just the whitest crowd you've ever seen. And so how do white people turn up on Christmas or New Year's Eve? Obviously by listening to Mr. Brightside by the Killers.
Not to mention
so
all
we
the
are
things she said is the first song you're introduced before we get the needle drop of Mr. Brightside when the countdown's coming.
And then, so when the countdown starts coming, then we're coming out of our cage, and we are doing just fine.
Just fine. Except Tim, who naturally goes, he starts to go, the worst bit about it, he goes in for the kiss, and then it turns into a handshake.
Yeah, oh my God. It's pretty sad. And then so we have kind of this sad, disappointing evening, and then basically the next day he has this conversation with his dad, right?
Yeah. So he's I don't know if New Year's is his birthday, or what, but it's essentially like, you're 21 now. You need to know my secret. And the secret is that the men in his family can travel back in time to events in their own life. As he says, I can't kill Hitler or shag Helen of Troy, unfortunately. Which the unfortunately is key there.
Yeah. Also, before he reveals the time travel thing, Bill Nighy says, "Get ready for spooky time," which I was like, every time I sit down to watch a horror movie, I just want Bill Nighy's voice in my head being like, "Get ready for spooky time." I was like, I will get ready for spooky time. But yeah, so they have this ability that runs only in the men in this family, where they can travel to a point like in their own life. The rules of this in the movie are sort of fast and loose. We don't get a lot of explanation, and I think that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, the movie kind of breaks its own rules.
At one point, very explicitly.
Yes.
But yeah.
Which, it's not a science fiction movie. It's a romantic comedy with this very light, loose time travel element. So I'm kind of okay with it. But it is a little just like, is it a little funny? And the key thing is, he's never told his wife this. He's kept it a secret, hasn't told his wife. And Domhnall Gleeson is obviously very skeptical. And
he's like, I don't believe you're like playing a trick on me, basically.
And Dad's like, so go into a small room or a cabinet or a bathroom.
He has
or
to
something.
go into a dark place.
Yeah.
Yep. And clench his fists. And he does, David, you just said cabinet or a bathroom. And I thought bathroom was funny because I was like, sometimes I'm clenching my fists in the bathroom, but it is not time travel related. It's just I've had too much gluten or like too many beers the night before. And, I am clenching my fists and begging for dear life in the bathroom. But unfortunately, I'm not visiting my past.
Yeah. And you just have to think of where you want to go, and you'll go back to that point. So he just does that, and goes in the cabinet, and he ends up back at that New Year's Eve party. And fueled by the energy of Mr. Brightside.
Now he's ready to come out of his cage.
There's a few big needle drops in this movie, like big swings with needle drops that shouldn't work. And I think they all do. Like songs that you're like, okay, I've heard this a million times. There's no way this movie needs this song, but it actually really works well, I think.
I feel like that's like a unique feature of the romantic comedy genre. I feel like they can get away with that more than most other film genres.
We should specify that. Speaking for myself, I am not a romantic comedy fan.
Oh yeah.
I do not necessarily dislike them, but I have not. They are not the first thing I'm reaching for when I want to watch a movie.
Yeah,
Yep.
this is maybe a thing that we should have addressed up top, but like likewise, right?
Yep.
So like I'm
Same.
not like a rom-com guy. I've seen a few just anecdotally throughout my life, but I don't like seek them out. And I haven't seen a lot of like the big ones. You
Yeah.
know, like I've never seen like When Harry Met Sally or Sleepless in Seattle or like the ones that people think of as like the big rom-coms, right? So yeah, this is both David and I kind of going out of our regular zone.
Yeah, and honestly, like, I am not a huge fan of rom-coms either.
Just this rom-com
Just this
specifically.
rom-com is like why I brought it. Is like this is the greatest rom-com ever made.
Well, we'll get to that
Yep.
part later, but that's
Well,
interesting that we're all kind of in the same boat there.
Well, and that's why this was a great pick for us, because like so early in the podcast we're trying to diversify things a bit, and this is a great change of pace from what we're used to seeing, what we've seen so far, and some of the things we have coming up. But anyway, Tim is at the New Year's Eve party. He stops his friend from being a jerk and knocking something over on accident, like he did at the actual party, and he walks right up to that girl and kisses her. So smooth. Domhnall Gleeson either has zero game in this movie, like negative game, or he's the fucking Riz King.
Yeah.
Right. And
No
there's no in between.
There's
No
no
in
in between.
Which is very funny because so many times in this movie you see him doing situations multiple times. And it's like the first time he like fully potatoes out and is like just the most embarrassing pasty skinny white man that anyone has ever seen. And then the next time he's like, I fucking got it.
I know what I'm doing. I'm locked in.
We don't see as much trial and error. I think there's maybe one time where we see like an intermediate effort, which is with Margot Robbie later. But yeah.
So he goes back to the meeting with his dad, and his dad gets into a little bit more of the rules here. Like we don't have to worry about the butterfly effect. His mom doesn't know, and his dad's like, "What do you want to do?" And Domhnall Gleeson's like, "Well, money to start with." And dad's like, money's a mixed blessing.
He's
You
like,
know,
that
your
usually doesn't work
grandfather was interested in that. And I'm like, okay, hold the fuck on. Hold up. He says like you should use it for things that you really want to use it for things that will really change your life. And I'm like, okay, money is going to really change my life.
It's true. This script is being written by a person who wrote Love Actually and does not have to worry, or directed Love Actually and does not have to worry about like rent, right?
Yeah.
Because he's like, just ignore the money thing. It's fine.
As I'll come to defense for that line, as we'll see later in the film, Tim's profession is already lucrative.
True.
So he's
true.
like
Yeah,
he's already studied for that by this time and is going into that profession. So he may not have. He very clearly does not have to worry about money once we get to the end of the film.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And also in this scene, Bill Nighy. So Tim like asks his dad, what his dad used it for, and Bill Nighy said he used it to read a lot, right? Because essentially he can like go back in time and spend time there and then return to like the same moment in the present. So he's just used this to like essentially lengthen his lifespan to be able to read more than he would have been able to otherwise. And immediately I was like, this is what the Podmaster would do with this type of time travel. The Podmaster, David and I are recording from the Podmaster's office, which is also her library, and she has like hundreds of books and is the most avid reader I've ever met. And I was instantly like, oh, this is what my wife would do with this time travel ability. Whereas I would be doing what Domhnall Gleeson does later in this movie, which is just banging like when he has the opportunity to have sex, he just does it multiple times over and over and over again. That's what I would be doing.
So Tim is finally like, oh, maybe I'll use it to get a girlfriend. His dad's like, okay, virgin.
I literally
fucking
wrote down
loser.
the
Loser's
line
son.
next
Sorry,
to Bill
I just
Nighy's
told-
so charming because he drops the like, oh, I'd really love to find a girlfriend with this gift, and Bill Nighy just goes, fuck.
He's like, well, I used it to like read every book that's ever been written, but okay, sure, go get your dick wet, I guess.
And soon after, Domhnall Gleeson has his first opportunity to put this to the test because Charlotte, played by Margot Robbie, shows up to stay with them for 2 months. She's like the cousin of Kit Kat's boyfriend, Jimmy. There's this great scene where they're both like laying out on the lawn, and Margot Robbie asks Domhnall Gleeson to put suntan lotion on her back. And Domhnall Gleeson has the reaction that I would have if Margot Robbie asked me to put suntan lotion on her back, which is absolutely. And he runs over and the bottle just like squirts it all out.
Yes,
and, like, it
he
totally messes it
prematurely
up.
ejaculates sunscreen.
So he goes back in time and he does it just like he's just like super smooth. Like he has his glasses on. He's reading a book and she asks him to do it. He's like, 1 sec, love. And he shuts the book and just nonchalantly walks over and does it. Margot Robbie, I did not expect Margot Robbie to be in this movie. I will try to contain my horniness for Margot Robbie on this podcast.
Yeah, I wasn't going to throw this empty beer can at you if you get too horny.
But she's great here, obviously. So we kind of montage through the 2 months that she's staying with them and how they become closer.
Yeah.
They play tennis.
One of many montages in this movie. It's a very montagey film.
Yeah.
Yeah, we cover a lot of time in this movie.
Yeah.
Well, it is about time.
It is about time.
But yeah, so there's like a Margot Robbie staying with them montage. And we get, basically, this is where we get like to the end of the visit, right?
Yeah. It's like the last night that she's there. And he goes down to her room and knocks on the door. And he says, I have something to tell you. And she's like, are you going to tell me that you love me by chance?
Which I imagine is Margot Robbie. That's a thing that she just has to do anytime any man comes up and says, I have something to tell you.
Yep.
She's like, is it that you're in love with me? Because let's just nip this in the bud right now, which is basically what she does. Where she's like, maybe not.
And she's like, you had your chance, but you left it to the last night, and it's kind of insulting. And so Domhnall Gleeson just leaves the room with his tail tucked between his legs.
And goes into the closet to sadly jerk off. I mean, travel back in time.
Yeah, he remembers like, oh shit, I can just travel back in time. And the time travel sequences in this are very quick. So he goes back to the beginning of the summer, and we fast forward to, I think, in the middle of her visit. Mm-hmm. Same sort of setup. She's downstairs or she's in her bedroom that she's using, and
the way this is done, like cinematically, is pretty cool, because it's like he walks out of her room, walks into the closet, and the closet door shuts, and you get like the time travel sound, and then he comes out and knocks on her door again and walks in, and she's there again in a different outfit.
Yeah.
So it's like clear that time has passed, but it's like, and that's how a lot of the time travel in this movie is handled. It's basically like the camera will hold on a scene, right? And he'll walk out of frame, and then you'll hear like the time travel whoosh sound, and then he'll walk back into frame and just do the scene again.
Yep.
But he'll behave differently. Yep. And I think that it's like it's both very simple and very, very effective. Because it's not too flashy. Especially because of how much the time travel is used in this movie. It's like a very good way of handling it.
So he comes back into the room, just crushes it again. Like again, he turned on the Riz. He says something about her hair, and she says like, let's wait and see how things go. Talk to me again on the last night.
which is there's
and
just
she's clearly more into him at this point
Yeah.
than she was previously, but he says this voiceover line about how all the time travel in the world can't make someone love you.
Right. Yeah.
And
it's clear that this was just never going to happen.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
Like she gave him a little bit more of a chance. She was more into him, but it just wasn't going to happen. And listen, if I had the ability to time travel, and I had a chance with Margot Robbie, and I fumbled that choice twice, I would just kill myself.
No, I think
I would
that's
just
the
fucking
rest-
kill
That's
myself.
the rest of the movie if it stars you, David, is we keep on going back through every day for 2 months to see where we can make it happen.
It's still a 2 hour and 4 minute movie, but it's just 2 hours and 4 minutes of David doing that scene over and over, like every single day that she's there. Be like, how about now?
Now?
Dennis, do you care if I spoil the Flash for you?
Oh, no, I saw The Flash. I forgot to tell you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't see The Flash, but
The Flash sucks.
I'm not going to.
Don't watch the Flash.
It's pretty bad.
The end of the movie, there's like Flash 1 and Flash 2.
Yep.
And the final battle of the movie is basically unwinnable. Like they keep losing, going back in time, trying again, keep losing, going back in time, trying again. And Flash 2 is like obsessed with trying to get this right. And at one point he comes through the portal just like totally battle scarred and his mind's broken and he's tried it 100 times. And he's like, the next one I'll get it. That would be me with Margot Robbie.
Dark Flash and About Time.
You'd be like you'd be like unshaven for like years, and your like hair would be all gray. like I'm still going. I'm gonna make this happen.
Oh yeah, that's my movie. That's my movie.
But that's not this movie. So what actually happens next is he then moves to London, right?
Yeah.
That's the next thing that happens.
He moves to London to start his career as a lawyer and moves in with this playwright that I guess his dad knows named Harry, played by Tom Hollander.
Who fucking rocks.
Might be my favorite, I don't know about favorite character, but definitely my favorite side character of this movie. There's a few quirky side characters.
Oh, he is my favorite character.
And he stands out.
movie.
Also, every line reading he gives is the best line reading for that line.
Oh, 100%. I think Bill Nighy is giving the best performance in this movie, but this character Harry is the best character in this movie. And he's a playwright, right? Which there's a lot of theater stuff in this movie, and as somebody who's like connected to the theater world a little bit, all of this was really hitting for me. Where I was like, oh, I know this guy. I know this drunk asshole who is never happy with his own work. Like that rings true to me. But yeah, so he moves in with Harry, and Harry's basically immediately like, oh, fuck you, I hate you.
Yeah,
you interrupted the one good thought I've had in 4 months or whatever.
And I like that there's kind of a fake out the movie does where he walks up, you see him through the window in the door, walking up to the door, and he looks kind of like he's going to be pleasant. And then he opens the door and is just immediately an asshole. Like, who the fuck are you? What do you want? And then when Tim finally comes in, he's like, I was having the first good idea I've had in a decade when you rang on the doorbell. You little shit. And I love how he leans into shit. He's the asshole British guy from Pirates of the Caribbean 2 and 3. If anyone's listening who doesn't know this guy, that's what I've seen him probably in a million things because there's 20 British actors. But he's bringing that same energy as a British Royal Navy asshole to a playwright.
I also love the scene where they're like walking up the stairs to he's showing Tim to his room, and there's like a picture on the wall of Harry's wife or whatever, and he's like, Tim's like, oh, who's that? And he's like, oh, like that's my wife. She's like the most astounding, the most intelligent, the best woman in the entire world, which is of course why she left me.
Yep.
Which I loved because like the way he's talking about her, you're gonna think that she's like dead, like that he's like a widower. Widower, that's how that works. Yes. Sorry, I have had 2 beers and I don't remember what words mean. But yeah, so so he's talking about her like she's dead, and then it's like, no, she just left because this guy's fucking insufferable, which is very funny.
He takes him up to his daughter's bedroom. His daughter no longer lives with him, and shows him a picture of her. He's like, "That's my daughter. Fuck her if you want. Everyone else has." And don't be too loud with the sex. And Domhnall Gleeson says, "I don't think there's much of a chance of that." And Tom Hollander goes, "Great. 2 losers in one house." He's just a sad, angry fuck of a man.
Yeah,
and
yeah, and therefore rules, and is my favorite part of this movie. Yeah. So then, Tim is he's like starting his lawyer job. We meet in another kind of little montage here his loser coworker Rory, who's going to show up a bunch. Rory's just the most pathetic little.
He's just a pushover, really.
There's a recurring bit with Rory where his boss like calls him the wrong name, like calls him Roger or Rupert or something, and he like doesn't correct him. Which I think is so funny. Which actually like is a thing that I do, because like obviously my name's Justus, which is not like a common name, and people will call me Justin, and I'm like, okay, yeah, sure, I answer to that, it's fine, I'm not gonna correct you. Honestly, it's my fault for having a name that is hard to understand and like comprehend as a name. Justin is a normal name that people have, so really it's not on them, it's on me. So I related to Rory a little bit more than I hoped to.
We kind of skip ahead to a few months later. Now he's settled into living in London. He hasn't had any dates, and his friend Jay, who's his childhood friend that we meet earlier, we meet him at the New Year's party. They decide to go to a date at a restaurant that has blind servers and a blind waitstaff, and the dates are in total darkness. And I guess this is actually a real place in London that does this.
Yeah, Dunlenoir. I really love when I can clearly see in a movie where a writer and director wants to do something or go somewhere, so they explicitly write it into the movie. I am sure Richard Curtis was just like, I really want to go to fucking Dunlenoir. Like, that sounds cool as fuck. Let's throw the scene there.
Let's just put it in the script and see if I can get in.
Yeah, and then I'll write it off as research for the script.
Yep.
Build the studio. Boom. I really want to go to this place. This looks cool as hell, having like a dinner in pitch darkness like this. That looks really fun and cool. And also this sets up the meet cute to end all meet cutes. Mm-hmm. This scene is so adorable that I wanted to throw up.
Yep.
Because this is where Tim, on this double date with his friend in this pitch black restaurant where he can't see the women that he's interacting with, meets Rachel McAdams' character.
Yeah, we just kind of montage through this date in complete darkness, and the only thing we get to indicate the time has passed to us is a little time code at the bottom that shows us how long they've been dating. And Vanessa Kirby is also playing her friend Joanna, who pops in and out of the movie. They're doing a double date sort of thing. We learned that Mary likes Kate Moss, which is a key thing that'll come back later. And you can tell, what I love about this is it's complete darkness, and you can already tell that they have chemistry and that in some way they are compatible with each other.
Because nobody has mastered the flirty giggle like Rachel McAdams. She does that little flirty giggle, and even though you can't even see her face, I'm like,
yep.
You know? She's just the best at it. She's the best at just being the most charming and likable person.
Yeah.
That has ever existed.
And and absolutely natural, which is something I like, opposed to our opening with Mary, who is Margot Robbie's character, or sorry, Charlotte, who's Margot Robbie's character. the trying to force something versus something that naturally happens. So with this meet cute, we're getting the actual emotions, true natural feeling, versus when we were watching earlier, even our Riz King of Domhnall Gleeson can't even score Margot Robbie at that time.
Yeah, and he's like trying a lot less hard in this scene with Rachel McAdams, and I think is generally trying less hard with her throughout most of the movie. He doesn't do as much of the sonnet-esque compliments like he did with Margot Robbie's hair or whatever in the previous scene, because there's real chemistry there, right? That's being reciprocated. And so it falls, you're right, Dennis, into kind of this natural rhythm that feels very like, it immediately is like, oh, these people are like made for each other.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, like, there's a part where they get served dessert and he tries to serve it to her, and he sort of like hits her in the face with a fork, whatever, and it gets in her eye. And if that were Margot Robbie, he'd probably be going back in time to correct that. But he just rolls with it, and she, they laugh about it. It's part of the experience. He's much more involved in the moment-to-moment interaction with her.
Yeah, and I think it's a notable thing because we've established that the way that you time travel is to go to a dark place and clench your fists. And I think it is so intentional that this scene happens in complete darkness. It's pitch black the entire time, and he never time travels to redo anything in this scene, right? It's like he has the ability the entire time, because the whole time he's in a dark place where he could go back and say anything different and do anything different, and he never does. He just lets it play out because it's perfect the way it's happening, mistakes and all,
Yep. And I think this also is the clearest indication of Tim's character. This is where, like, we joke about him going from, like, awkward, pasty white guy to Riz King. This entire date, he is the Riz King. Eventually, the date ends. Jay and Tim are waiting outside to see what they actually look like. We get Vanessa Kirby out, and Jay's super excited for a blonde. She's kind of fighting him off in the way she can, promising to give him her number if she can help find a cab. And then we get to the solid moments of looking at the door. There's no indication why Mary takes so long to get out of the restaurant, which I think is really funny. It's just like a tense shot.
I think it's to get the dessert off her face because she got the dessert in her eye.
Okay, yeah, probably.
She was probably
flushing
in the bathroom.
her eye out with the strawberry mousse. And then, fucking Rachel McAdams walks out, and that's just like any person's dream.
Yeah, and she's commenting about her, like, her outfit and her hair, like I don't know if it's just her character thinks that she's too plain or the movie thinks that she's too plain, but it doesn't work because it's Rachel McAdams.
Well, she does say later in the movie when she's talking to Tim's mom, she does say that she's insecure, and I was like, yeah, that's the thing that's been portrayed on screen as well. And you're right, like it's Rachel McAdams. Like, what does she have to be insecure about? But it's one of those rom-com things where I'm like, okay, her friend is like a tall, leggy blonde, and even though Rachel McAdams is one of the most beautiful women who has ever existed, I will buy for the purposes of this movie that she feels like she's like average or whatever.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Because it's you got to put on your rom-com glasses and be like, okay, the most beautiful person I have ever seen in my entire life is now apparently regular.
Because she has fringe. Oh my god.
That's right. Yeah, but in 2013, before like the baby bangs were cool, and she's like, "Is it too short?" And I'm like, "You just wait until like 2019. that shit's gonna be right in."
Yeah.
But yeah. So they meet face to face and are basically, I mean, the chemistry that was there when they were in the dark is fully there now that they have seen each other, because they're Domhnall Gleeson and Rachel McAdams. So, no issues there. So they have kind of their charming little banter. He gets her number. She puts it in his phone. He finds out her name is Mary. I think that is covered here and not in the restaurant. It doesn't matter. Anyway. So then she's basically like, I hope I hear from you. And he's like, you definitely will. And that's it for our meet cute. Again, to me, just the meet cute to end all meet cutes.
Yeah.
It's like, it's hard to describe without watching this scene how fucking so adorable it is.
I think it's encapsulated with Riz King's last line. After he gets the number, he says, "I used to think this phone was an old piece of junk. Now it's my most prized possession."
Man, he's got the juice.
Yep, he has it in him.
That's a solid
It's
line.
always there. That's why we get the Riz King when he goes back in time.
Yeah. He's so fucking charming in this movie. And again, I think it's very, very important that he is charming and likable, because otherwise many things that he does in this movie would be creepy.
Only one thing. Only one thing
Okay.
is very creepy.
There's a couple things. Can I say something without you guys getting mad at me?
Okay. I can't promise that, David. Because we've already recorded our next episode, and I was really mad at you.
Very mad at me.
So,
And I liked the movie, but not enough apparently. So, I like Rachel McAdams
I knew this
a lot.
This is gone. Yep.
She's great in this movie. I think her character is written really, really well. I think the characters and the actors both have really good chemistry. I don't know that I ever quite get what makes her so special and what makes her worth all of this time travel hubbub, at least in the beginning of the movie, because there's something that's going to come up, and he is like he's really desperate to try to salvage this relationship with his time travel business. And I don't know that I get what makes her so worth it. Again, like, she's good and I like her and I understand why they love each other, but I don't necessarily get it at this point in the movie why he's so enamored with her, if that makes sense.
I think he's realizing what actual love is, because we have the whole part with, Margot Robbie in the beginning, and it's infatuation, it's lust. He's chasing after this unattainable goal. And then during this meet cute, he's falling in love with this woman instantly and feeling these feelings that he probably did not feel when it came to Charlotte.
But he also hasn't been laid in a while.
Okay. I think, yeah. So as someone who has a wife that I have been with for 10 years and married to for 8.
And who has to be very careful about what he says because she's sitting in this room.
She's threatening to unplug my mic. This scene was not hard for me at all. This part of this movie was not hard for me at all, because I, as the viewer, this movie was, romantic comedies ask you as the viewer to put yourself into the protagonist, right? Like, one of the reasons this type of movie is so popular, and especially very popular generally with women, right, is that often the characters are a vessel for the viewer, right? And you're supposed to fill the movie with your own experiences in love and relationships and stuff, right? And that kind of shorthand works on me really well because I have had like a very long-term relationship that I am very like passionate about, and I feel like I am somebody who like believes in true love and like has found it. So like this shit fucking, there's like a shortcut for me. So I think that like your mileage may vary is I guess what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. And I think I understand seeing this and being like, okay, like what is the deal? Like why are they so immediately like attached and like they have to be together, right? Because it's like if you are unable to put yourself into the situation, either because you're the type of viewer who doesn't do that, or because you don't have the experience where like that is a thing that comes easily to you, right? Then I think it's like harder. But for me, I was just like, oh, it's like when I met my wife.
Yep.
And I was like, and I loved my wife right away, and I'm so happy that she's with me. And every moment in the movie where he then is doing something to make the relationship work, I'm like, yeah, he has to, because that's me and my wife.
And he has huge wife guy energy, and it's just him during that date realizing like, fuck, this is my wife. So my wife.
Yeah.
So he's gonna do
My
everything.
wife.
My wife. So he's
We
gonna
were all
do
holding it
whatever
back.
My
for
wife.
her. I think it's just the realization of like fucking when you know you know.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm a person who has had that moment in real life where I'm like, when you know, you truly do know, and it's just a thing that I was like, I recognized it, and I was like, the homing missile, the romantic homing missile has fucking nailed me.
Yeah, and that makes sense because I think we all really like this movie. But I've had different romantic experiences than you have, and Dennis has as well. Dennis, I'm sure you have as well. So like, I think our individual mileages may vary ever so slightly on how much this movie connected with us. So getting back into it. Harry's play has opened that night. Domhnall Gleeson comes home, and Harry says his play is open that night, and an actor flubbed his line harder than any actor has flubbed his line before. He is wine drunk. He is pissed off. He says it was the Titanic of play openings because there were no survivors, no women, no children, not even Kate fucking Winslet.
Which is a very funny line.
So Tim decides to go back
Be
to
a fucking bro.
go to the play opening. I really like this. This is not the only time that he does this, but I really like that Tim, this moment, Tim uses his abilities totally selflessly.
Yes.
And I think,
And for someone who doesn't even like him all that much.
and I think this ties so hard into the theme of the movie, which is like, or maybe not necessarily the theme of the movie, but like a stated character intention for Tim, right? Which is like when he learns about time travel, he says he's going to use it for love, right? And like the voiceover narration was basically like, it was always going to be love for me, right? And I think that you're thinking about romantic love because this is a rom-com, but what you see in this movie is that he uses it for love in multiple ways.
All types of love.
He uses it, yes, different types of love, right? Friendship, family, right? He uses it for his sister. He uses it for his dad, right? It's not just to get a girlfriend, right? Because he has all of those types of love in him, right? And they're all kind of equally important to him, right? Like doing something nice for Harry, a guy who has given him a place to stay, and has been a friend to him, is like just as important as like going back and getting something right with the girl. So I really like that too. I thought it was really good. So he goes back and he's trying to fix this line flub, right? And so he thinks that the best way to do this is to just knock on the actor's dressing room door and be like, "Hey, fucking study your lines."
And the actor's played by Richard Griffiths, who I would say American audiences will best know as Vernon Dursley from the Harry Potter movies. This is his last movie.
But he's like a legendary British actor of stage and screen.
Yeah,
like
for sure.
A real titan of, one of the greatest of his generation.
And I love Domhnall Gleeson's just like, hey, maybe give those lines a once over. And Richard Griffiths is like, fuck off.
Which to be fair,
just a great fuck off bellows out of this man.
Which to be fair, if I was backstage and some fucking rando walked up to me and he was like, "Hey, do you know your lines?" That's also what my reaction would be. I would be like, "Go away." He calls him, I think he calls him a ginger twerp, which I was like, Domhnall Gleeson is indeed a ginger twerp.
Yeah.
That is a accurate insult. But then we do see this gets to him a little bit, and he picks up his script and starts looking through those lines again. And then we're watching the production, right? And we get to the bit where he had forgotten his lines in the last go round, right? And he nails them, but then another fucking actor goes up on his lines, and watching this scene of this actor on stage just completely blanking out on his lines, and the audience just like sitting there so uncomfortably was giving me so much anxiety as a viewer, because like I've been in that situation and I'm like, oh god,
You see him freeze and go wide-eyed. And it's just dead silence for a few seconds.
this is scarier to me than any horror movie.
Yeah, this actor is played by Richard E. Grant, another legendary British actor, stage and screen.
So he fucks up his lines, and Domhnall Gleeson is now like, great, now I got to go back and fix this somehow. So the way that he has fixed it is he has written cue cards, and he's in the wings, and everybody backstage is like, who the fuck is this guy? Like, what's this guy doing back here with these cue cards? And so he cue cards Richard E. Grant through it, and the play's a success.
Yeah. I think this
Except
is
for
like
the fact
a
that
really
apparently
good...
the two lead actors didn't know their lines. Sorry, Dennis.
No, sorry. I was just bringing up the point that this is a really good... I'm going to bring up this theme later on, but with our first actor now knowing their lines, someone else then forgets their lines. There are some things that even with time travel come to fate, like these stagnant moments that will happen, which I think is very interesting and, a staple of time travel media as well. But I really love the way it's portrayed in this movie, and I think it's a good foreshadowing of sometimes things have to happen.
Yeah. But in this case, the play is a success, right? And so Harry's all happy about it. As happy as Harry gets, which is basically he's still complaining about shit, but you can tell that this is a better outcome for him.
He's drunk and kind of happy as opposed to drunk and just totally pissed off.
Yeah.
But Domhnall Gleeson has lost Rachel McAdams' phone number. It's
because
not
he
in her
didn't
phone
go
anymore.
to the dark
His phone
restaurant.
anymore. Yeah, because he didn't go to the date. The date never happened.
Yeah.
And I would think he would just go back in time and just go to the date again, but he just rolls with it, and I like that.
Well, I think that the reason is because then the play would be fucked up again.
Yep.
He can't do both,
Yep.
right? Because he can either be there fixing the play, or he can meet Rachel McAdams, and he decides to leave Harry's play a success, which I think is it speaks so much to the kind of guy he is.
Yep.
Where he's like, no, I can't take that away from Harry. I have to figure out another way to meet this woman.
Yep.
Right? So yeah. And speaking of which, this is the thing that I think would be creepy if he was not as charming.
Yeah.
Right? Because he does fix the play, right? And then is like, okay, now I don't have her number anymore. I know that she likes Kate Moss. That's basically the only thing. And her name is Mary, and that's basically all I know about her, right? And I need to figure out a way to meet this woman. And he does stalk her in a very cute and charming way in this portion of the movie, which again, I give it a pass because Domhnall Gleeson is so non-threatening as this character. Like, Tim seems very sweet and non-threatening. Yeah. But if the actor playing this role looked like me, this would be a very different movie.
Yeah. He's just so desperate to make it work and like forgetting the rules of time travel when he first... it's because Harry is raving about how well the play is going, and it is like he's totally nonplussed. He's like, they're calling me the greatest writer in Britain right now, and then he shows the magazine. They see there's a Kate Moss exhibit. He goes there, and like he's like poking her very friendly once he finally finds. There's another montage of him waiting what could be for weeks to figure out what day she goes to the exhibit.
There's multiple outfit changes, so he's definitely there for at least days, if not weeks.
Yeah. Set to Friday I'm in Love by The Cure, which is
which
another needle drop that shouldn't work, but it does.
It totally does. It's actually maybe my favorite needle drop in this movie.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Really good.
And this is maybe since you kind of brought it up already, Justus, about him being kind of creepy. This would be creepy otherwise if he wasn't so charming. This is maybe like a slight issue I have with this movie where he never tells her.
Right.
He never tells her that he has the time travel ability. And I think it robs her character of a lot of agency. And it casts this shadow. I'm speaking maybe a little hyperbolically, but it kind of casts this shadow of dishonesty over their relationship.
It definitely, I definitely agree with you to some extent. It does textually, just like in the context of like, if you take everything in the movie at like face value, it does textually read as manipulative, right? Because it's like, especially because, so they meet up at the gallery here, and he like treats her like she knows him already, which is a weird move, and kind of fumbles his way through it. And then we find out that she like has gotten a boyfriend, right? And he goes back and essentially undoes their relationship, which that's the part that feels very manipulative to me.
This is the one thing, because I think the movie is stacked where we have him being a bro for Harry, and then later on we'll see another non-selfish use of the time travel. But he sees that someone is taking his wife, and he's like, it's straight up, I wrote my note there, was like, I'm about to ruin this man's whole career. When he's fishing for information about how they met so he can go back in time and stop them from meeting. And
yeah,
it does open this wide, ridiculous moral gray area when it comes to time travel. Yeah. Because, like, I wrote this note as well, like, Justus, what would you do if you were in the same situation with Podmaster? Like, you had technically met her first, and that relationship was budding and starting. However, this new fucked up timeline, where morally, where does a wife guy go from there?
I feel like answering this question might. I don't want to reveal too much about the Podmaster and my personal relationship if she doesn't want me to.
Yep.
But without the time travel, I have been in as close to this position as you can possibly get, which is essentially the Podmaster and I met in college. We dated. We broke up. She got another boyfriend. And then I decided I was wrong. And I came back in and we started dating again before they were broken up.
Yep.
So I have done this just without the time travel. Ergo, this moment in this movie played for me. Despite the fact that I saw the problematic nature of it and how it can be read as a little manipulative, I was also like, but they're right for each other, and this guy seems like an asshole.
It does. It does lend itself. This is the one movie of the film, or the one part of the film where it's like, okay, we're on Team Tim. Like, you can't.
Right.
You gotta be fine with this. You gotta be fine and realize that they are meant for each other. And I think that's what it's trying to get to, and it's this weird, problematic plot point.
Yeah. To be fair, if I was in Tim's situation and I had met the love of my life and through some sort of time travel fuckery, she ended up with some asshole, I would probably go back in time and kill him as a child, like the Terminator.
So all that to say, as a wife guy, my official stance on this is that it's a little bit of a gray area, but having navigated it myself, ruin this man's whole life, it doesn't matter.
Yep.
You gotta be with her. That's what matters. And many blessings to the real man involved in my real scenario. I hope that he's doing fine. The Podmaster is making so many faces right now.
Tim gets all the information about how they met. It ends up being a party at Vanessa Kirby's house. He goes to the party, lies about knowing Mary, finds her on a balcony, begins to start fumbling the bag again, and then starts going into the basic time travel romance trope of like, here's a thing you said verbatim I'm going to say to you, which is going to feel like a kismet connection. And then
he whips out a commentary that she made about Kate Moss's work or something, and the panties drop and she just eats that shit up right away.
She's like, this straight man knows so much about Kate Moss. This is unbelievable.
He jumps.
What a unicorn.
He jumps directly from that to be like, all right, you want to get the fuck out of here? Like, there's no other preface other than like, yeah, I agree with the Kate Moss commentary. And he's like, all right, let's go get some starters at a restaurant. Like,
And she's like down. She's like, oh, okay. Which again, I think this is a moment where the movie is just showing you like there's such instant chemistry between these people that was like this was going to happen one way or another. You know.
Yeah.
In much the same way, Dennis, that you were saying, there's like some things that he seems to be fated to be unable to change. It seems like this is a thing that like the universe has fated to be.
Yes.
Right. Like he's gonna be with her somehow. You know. Also, that's kind of a good moment for me to kind of circle back on something that I was saying before, which is like textually, if you're just looking at the movie at face value, some of this time travel manipulation that he's doing is like a little creepy or like robbing her character of a little bit of agency. However, I think that it's important. And I think one of the reasons that this movie plays so fast and loose with the rules of time travel and like breaks its own rules at points is because I don't think that the time travel in this movie is meant to be taken super seriously as like a textual thing that is happening. I think the movie is about the movie's themes, right, transcend the time travel device. And I think time travel is standing in this movie for looking back on moments in your own life, right? And choosing how you evaluate them, right? And so even if what's actually happening between the characters can be read one way, I think if you apply the lens of like, okay, but this is a metaphor for memory, right? Then it's like that makes some of this stuff a little bit less problematic. And maybe I'm giving the movie a little bit of an out there.
Yeah.
But as I was watching it, that is how I was feeling about it. Where I was like, it's clear that the time travel in this movie is not something that you're supposed to think too much about. You're supposed to be thinking about the emotional moments that these characters are moving through, right? As opposed to the device that brings them to that situation.
Yeah, I'd agree with that as well. I think this movie is the events in this movie are mostly very low stakes, except for one event that comes up later in the movie, but even that is still treated fairly low stakes. And I like that. I like this movie is just like a nice warm blanket that you can just put on and enjoy.
Because
the time travel. Go ahead.
Because no, I'm moving a little bit forward. So finish your thought.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say like, I wish there was maybe a little bit slightly higher stakes involved with the time travel, but the time travel is really just serving the thematic purpose of the story, more than anything else. Go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, and I think just moving a little bit forward in the plot and coming back to this theme I brought up of fate when they go and get the starters after he's pulled her away from the party and ruined this whole man's life. They even say something flippant about him as he's like walking into the party. Domhnall Gleeson's like, what a dickhead. And she's like, ha, yeah. Which is just very funny. When they're getting those appetizers, the chemistry happens again just like it had happened in Don Noir. Like, they are feeding off each other in such a organic, and the chemistry is on fire. Like, I was like, did you guys fuck during the movie, like while you were filming? Because this is intense.
Yeah, bro whips out a prostitute joke, a sex worker joke.
Okay.
Yeah. And somehow saves this, where she's like, oh, so you're, and he's like, he just rolls through it and saves the conversation.
This is maybe a good time to mention this, but I think this movie uses the word prostitute more than literally any other movie I've ever seen. People are making jokes about prostitutes.
That's
and
how
calling
Vanessa
each other prostitutes.
Kirby's character is described in the beginning by Rachel McAdams.
Yes, I was like, oh, we really love that word in this screenplay.
I'm not a fan of those jokes, specifically with, I guess, Vanessa Kirby's character.
Yep.
Here it's funny and charming when I can't remember.
Because he says,
I can't remember exactly the context.
Sometimes I think about prostitutes because Mary reveals that she reads for an editor. So he's like,
which by the way, huge rom-com job there. Rachel McAdams being someone who just reads books at a publisher for a living, I was like, okay, you are fully a rom-com character, because that does not exist. Just like the type of architect who's like designing one building for like 6 months. Yeah. Super rom-com job. Like nobody actually fucking does that.
Yeah,
anyway,
it's not the fucking
you were
Fountainhead.
saying.
Yeah. But she reveals that she is a reader, and he wonders if she gets a loss of joy for reading on her own, just like he sometimes wonders if sex workers get tired of sex after they're done being sex workers. And she kind of like cutely brings up like, oh, you think about this often? And he's like, oh, sometimes I think about it. And then like they're doing dual bits at each other for a little bit while flirting.
And just tossing the word prostitute back and forth the entire time.
Yeah, I need to study at this man's dojo of game, because I don't know how he's doing this.
I think you just need to watch more rom-coms, David.
Yeah.
Because I think this is a rom-com thing. I think you can just pick up the riz from watching more movies within this genre niche. But yeah, so they're having their like super cute. And I do think I agree with Dennis here. Like, I think the chemistry is just like on fire. And I think that honestly, this is a thing that like Rachel McAdams is really good at. She's worked within the rom-com genre a lot. And I think she just is one of those people where if you put her on screen with any other person, it'll just be like, oh, these people are fucking.
This is not the first movie where Rachel McAdams has been in love with a time traveler.
Yeah, that is crazy that there is another one.
She carved out a little niche for herself.
Yeah, it's like that meme where it's like, if I had a nickel for every time that happened, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice.
Yeah.
That's from Phineas and Ferb. Anyway.
Dr. Doofenshmirtz. Yeah, but then after their little dinner, she goes like, oh, do you want to walk me back to my car? He's like, of course. There's a little montage as they walk back to the car.
Which, by the way, we've been talking about his riz. This is a fucking super good move on her part.
Huge move is they're walking for what seems like ever, and he's like, you had trouble parking, right? And she's like, what? And he's like, we've been walking forever. And she goes, well, the thing I didn't tell you is that I got a lift to the party, so my car was at home. There's my car, there's my home.
Ergo, you have walked me home. Come inside and clap these cheeks. Is the implication? And it's like when she dropped the reveal of like, oh, I'm parked at home. I was like, oh, they fucking.
And then they have a sweet little kiss. I want to mention the score real fast because there's a cute little score that pops up. I think when like. Meant to be those fate moments happen. It's very sweet. Dun, dun, dun. So that score comes in as they kiss again, and then they head upstairs.
Yeah, and she says like, I'm gonna change into my pajamas real quick. Like, give me a second and then come up. And I love that she's like, my new pajamas. And he comes up and she's wearing like these adorable, like not sexy at all, like full like button up pajama top with like the long sleeves and like the collar and shit.
She's in the honk shoes, me 20s.
Yes, yeah. It's like yeah, it is fully like, I am gonna go to sleep in a Looney Tunes cartoon. She's just missing the little Ebenezer Scrooge nightcap. But he is not at all turned off by this, because after all, in those honk shoe me 20s, it's still Rachel McAdams. I like him like tripping on his way in. He like stumbles and like trips over her shoes or whatever. And then we cut to, so like they have a little kiss, and then it cuts to after sex, right? And he's basically like, hey, sorry, it'll be better next time. And she's like, no, it was totally fine. And then this is where he does what I would do.
He goes back in time. And he moves the shoes out of the way. There was a bit earlier where he's sort of fumbling with the bra. It opens at the front, which it is like the most beautiful thing in the world, the most beautiful invention that man ever bestowed upon us. And so he moves the shoes out of the way. He opens the bra. right away.
She's like,
And
you
they-
really know your bras, because
and
he
they-
fumbled with it the first time, and now he's like, boom, I got this.
Yeah, and we cut to post-sex, and it is full on like under the sheets, out like just lying together out of the sheets, looking up at the ceiling, out of breath, like that was amazing. But it's
that
not
is-
enough for him.
Nope.
He goes back again, and this time, rather than waiting the 5 minutes for her to change, he just comes right in, and
He's like, I
apparently-
couldn't wait.
Apparently, they fucked each other's brains out because then they end up on the floor
They're on the
afterwards.
floor,
It's
yeah.
like
Which is
it's
a
like
very
a
funny
Sigma
visual gag.
male edit. It goes from like Riz King to Baby Gronk Riz King on the third one, where he's just like he's taking his shirt off as he's entering, immediately takes off the front clasping bra, and then they're on the floor.
Yeah, and it is a very funny visual gag because it's been cutting to the same shot of the bed every time, and it cuts to the same shot of the bed the third time, and they're not in frame, and then the camera just pans down to the foot of the bed, and they're laying on the floor. It's a funny like camera gag. Also, I have a question for you guys. Is his cock resetting every time he goes back in time, or did he go 3 times in a row?
No,
I think this dude.
it's the rules
Go-
state it's the same time in your life. So like he goes back to
Okay, so it's the same nut every
Yeah,
time.
exactly. And then it has a joke at the very end where she's like, "Oh, 1 time's enough for my perfect guy," and he's like, "Jesus Christ, I nutted 3
Right.
times this night for me."
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I think dude is shooting ropes all night. I think he's just got. It's like he comes, goes back in time, and everything's just reloaded down there.
So that poses my question: How often do you think you would have like a good Jack sesh and then rewind time to have the same good Jack sesh?
Honestly, I think if I had this power, I don't know if I'd jack it at all anymore. Because if I was ever in the mood, I could just go back to a time right before I fucked.
Yeah.
And then I
Yep.
could just do that. And then, so I think jacking would be obsolete, you know?
Yeah, maybe what I would do is go back like a month before a time in my life that I knew that I fucked, and just try to make it through that month without jacking off. So then when I got to that moment, I'm just like ready to burst like a dam.
So you just like, so you essentially just set yourself up for a
Instead
mega
of-
nut. That's
Instead of about time, it's about edging.
that is the most strategic thinking about coming I have ever heard anyone exercise.
This is gonna
Because
be.
I was like, I'd go back to the moment right before, and David's like, no, I'm playing the long game. I'm gonna go nuclear.
This is gonna be the part that I clip and post on Instagram a few days after.
By the way, the Podmaster has been looking absolutely disgusted this entire time. She's like, I can't believe she literally just did the gun in her mouth mime.
Something I will say, if I can bloviate about your own podcast, I did listen to the first episode, and I was just like, wow, if the audience knew how we talk to each other on Twitter, they would not expect this level of like deep, well thought out commentary. They would expect that last bit for the next 2 hours.
Yeah. Realistically, if you would base your preconceived notions of this podcast exclusively on our tweets, it should just only be that. You're totally right.
Yeah.
But we actually do have some analysis that we're gonna do here because we're serious people, and we're film fans. We're not just pigs.
The world
Second
really
page of my
needed
notes now.
another podcast by 2 straight white men. And
Yeah.
this is what you get.
You know what? The word "cum" had to be the word "cum" had to be uttered at some point on this podcast. I'm surprised we made it 5 episodes in. I don't think we've said "cum" before.
We've talked about dicks plenty.
Yeah, but I don't think we've said "cum." We've talked about I've said erections so many times. I did say Leatherface finishes, but I don't
Yeah.
think I said like jizz or spunk or cum.
You did say pee floppy cock.
I did say pee
Credit to Eric Siska.
Yes.
But yeah. Let's get on with this movie.
Another
I think we should spend 10
Another
more
montage.
minutes on cum.
Yeah, another montage, this time in the underground station, set to, I have him written down as British Dave Matthews, who's just like playing this song and kind of busking in the underground. And we montage through different moments of their relationship, like leaving for work and Christmas shopping and stuff. And one person will go down one tunnel to a train, the other person goes down the other. It's a really nice little montage. The song is nice and pleasant and inoffensive. It's not like the thing I'm going to remember from this movie, but it's good. He's a real artist. I didn't look up his name, but I just called him British Dave Matthews because that's what I thought of for some reason. So at this point, they moved in together. And we get this moment one morning where her parents are coming to visit.
Which, by the way, this is the most uncool thing that Rachel McAdams does to him in this entire movie, which is, hey, my parents said they were coming. I thought they would cancel because they always do. But guess what? They're going to be here literally right now. Put some pants on. And I was like, excuse me?
I think this is all the payback from like when the time travel like robs Rachel McAdams' character of like agency. This is full karma. She does not stop fucking this situation up.
Yeah.
And it just keeps on making it worse and worse for Domhnall Gleeson.
It's both the universe and the screenplay writing itself.
Yeah.
But setting that balance of power a little bit more even.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So the parents show up. I also thought it was funny in this scene when she was like, my parents are coming right now, and they're like sort of conservative or whatever, and he's like, parents, American parents, right? And then he like goes to put on some jeans, and she's like, maybe not those pants because they're so conservative, and he like puts on some slacks, which I thought was a funny gag, and like tucks his shirt in. But yeah, so then the really funny thing here is when they're about to come in and they're talking about what they can and can't say in front of the parents, and he's like, oh, do I live here? And she was like, yeah, sure, like you can mention that. And he was like, are we having sex? And she was like, well, maybe not oral. Right? Yeah. And so when they come in,
she says, no, you're definitely not living here.
Oh, you're right.
Which she fucks up later and like doubles down to really piss him off. But
yeah, you're right.
The big takeaway is like, do not mention oral. And he's like, how did you think that would fucking come up? I'm not going to mention oral to your parents.
And then he totally mentions oral to her parents.
Well, if you put oral in a guy's head like that, it's like I wasn't thinking about oral until you said oral. And now it's like the only thing I'm thinking about. So then, of course, he fucks it up and has to go back in time and
I don't know, Justus. Like, I'm stupid and I have terrible game, but even I probably would not ever mention my sex life with my girlfriend in front of her parents.
That's fair.
I think if that happened, again, I would probably just kill myself.
I don't think I've ever talked about my sex life with my wife in front of her parents. I hope not. Well, she's very vehemently encouraging me to continue not doing it. I hope they don't listen to this podcast where I'm talking about cum a bunch. Anyway, and then like they're having dinner basically, and Rachel McAdams kind of isn't letting him talk because she's afraid of him fucking stuff up, which is pretty funny. So she's basically like totally taking control of the conversation to make sure that her parents don't hate him, right? Which is sort of sweet on her end, right? Because it's like it's very clear that the point, like the reason she's like not letting him speak for himself is because it's so important for her that her parents like him and approve of him, right?
Yeah, she states that and goes like, it's because I love him and I want you to love him too. So that's why I'm speaking so nervously.
Right. So the disastrous scene with the parents happens, and then after that, Rachel McAdams is basically like, I'm just gonna need like a whole day to sleep this off because that was so stressful, right? And
he has theater tickets, in which he invites her to the theater, but she doesn't want to go. So he brings along his awkward friend Rory from his lawyer or his internship. I think it's an internship at this point at the law office. And afterwards, he runs into Margot Robbie.
By the way, before he leaves for the theater, when he's leaving Rachel McAdams sleeping, she does say, "I really like bed and I really hate theater," which is something that I think I need to get the Podmaster on a shirt. Like, I think she just needs a t-shirt that says, "I really like bed and I really hate theater." But yeah, he sees Margot Robbie at the theater when he's there with his friend Rory.
He crashes and burns yet again. Just flipping back and forth in terms of his game. Because they talk after the play, and she's there with her girlfriend, her girl that is a friend. And apparently, in 2013, Domhnall Gleeson had not picked up on this as a popular parlance among women, so he assumes that they're gay. He goes back in time, and he does it again, where he's like, "Hey, you shouldn't say that, or people will think you're gay." And her friend is like, "I'm gay. Do you have a problem with that?" So he goes back and does it again. This doesn't really work for me at all. Like, this is one of those, like, one of the shittier things that he does in this movie. I mean, not the shittiest, but it's not a funny joke to me.
Yeah, it probably played maybe slightly better in 2013 than it does in 2023, but yeah.
I don't know. Even then, I feel like we were already heading in a direction where social graces and the social opinion of gay people in those kind of jokes was like, and not that he's like doing really homophobic shit or anything,
right?
But it's just I think we were already heading in a direction that we are at today at that point.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't read as homophobic at all to me, but it does read as like, the joke is not that Margot Robbie's friend is gay. The joke is that Domhnall Gleeson doesn't know how to act in front of a gay person, which it's like, that's kind of weird.
It's hard because we like him at this point, and he's mostly gotten past a lot of the awkward shit that he's done earlier in the movie. So I don't know. It's maybe one of the jokes in the movie that just doesn't work for me at all.
Yeah.
Like, we could take this out and I'd be fine with it.
Which, by the way, we haven't really talked about, like, the comedy in this movie sort of overall, like, as a whole. But I do think, like, we've called out a couple of, like, low points where it doesn't work for us, but I think overall this movie is really, really funny. I think it's a very, very funny. And I think that the fact that Richard Curtis wrote so much classic British television comedy, like, that really comes through. It's kind of that classic dry, wry British humor in a lot of this, and I think it really, really hits in most of the moments. And I think that's why it's more noteworthy in a moment like this where it doesn't, because overall I think this movie is quite funny.
Yeah. And I will say the punchline to this part, where the third time he goes back and Rory's like, "Hey, isn't that your friend he mentions her. And Domhnall Gleeson's like, "Fuck it, let's just get out of here. We should just leave." That's funny. That's a funny payoff to these two really awkward interactions that he's had earlier. But
Dennis, you were going to say something.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I'm agreeing with David and, like, hearing him that, like, and jumping off your point, Justus, that, like, it is very interesting that, like, the low moments in this movie are the dated moments. And I think that's what David is getting at, is, like, this is a very dated, like, haha, gay joke, where the punchline is just like, haha, gay. And it's not overtly homophobic, but it's just like, yeah, this wouldn't be in the script if it was a 2023 movie. Or, like, even maybe, like, I think David is right, like, we were trending upward then. I personally don't think it was, like, the end of it, but I feel like if the movie was written 2 years later, then that joke wouldn't have been included.
Or maybe even by a younger screenwriter in 2013, right? Because Richard Curtis was no spring chicken when he was writing the script in the 20-teens, right? So it's, like, also maybe just a little bit of a product of, the age of the author. A little bit.
Yeah.
Rory and Domhnall Gleeson decide to just leave, but he ends up running into her outside, and they decide to go hang out and have dinner. I like Rory says this line where he's like, she's so beautiful. If you had sex with her, you'd die, or something like that.
Yeah, he says it's like staring at the sun. You would go blind, and then you would have to have sex with her blind, and then you would die, which is very funny. He also the thing with Rory where his boss has been calling him the wrong name, and he like
Right.
doesn't correct his boss. He also introduces himself to Margot Robbie as Roger instead of Rory. Like he has internalized the wrong name. Yep. And fucks it up when he introduces himself to her, which I thought was really funny.
So they go out to dinner, and they have a nice time out, and then she just casually, out of nowhere, decides to bring up, maybe if we could travel back in time, I would have fucked your brains out. By the way, can you walk me home? And he does, and they're outside her apartment or hotel, wherever she's staying. And like, look, bro, I've seen Wolf of Wall Street too. I know you're looking at 2012, 2013 era Margot Robbie. Not that she isn't fucking gorgeous now, but you gotta keep it together. And he gets out of there, to his credit.
Yes, this was a moment where, because I didn't know what type of rom-com this was going to be. There are like basically fuck up and make up rom-coms where someone makes a huge mistake and then they have to win the person back. And then there's like the journey of a relationship type rom-com where there isn't a big fuck up and it's basically you're just watching these people navigate life. I didn't know which type of rom-com this was going to be. And in this moment, I was like, oh, is this a fuck up and make up? Like, is he going to like do a thing with Margot Robbie here? And then the rest of the movie is going to be him like trying to win Rachel McAdams back, because I was dreading that in this moment. And I honestly didn't know which decision the movie was going to make. And to my delight, he says, thanks or it was nice catching up with you. Right. And then he flees on foot and
wife guy.
Yes, he sprints back to Rachel McAdams to ask her to marry him.
I just remembered that I'm in love with Rachel McAdams, so now I'm gonna marry her.
But I even think it's not an I just remembered thing. It's this moment makes him realize how much he loves Mary.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? Because it's like he has everything that he thought he wanted. He has, you know, Charlotte in front of him saying that the girl who he says broke his heart, right? He has her right in front of him saying, come on in, let's do this thing, right? And he doesn't want to because he is in love with somebody else, right? And it's like, it's such a beautiful moment of this movie. And I cried a little bit here because I am a wife guy, and I was like, yeah, you go run to Rachel McAdams. You go ask her to marry you, because that's what you gotta be doing. You know? And we already kind of established earlier in the movie that him and Charlotte aren't right for each other, right? So if he made this choice on this one night, right? Like, it's like, yeah, you know, he'd be with Charlotte once, and then it would probably not work out. Right?
Yeah, because it's possible that she would never love him again. Like that idea of there is some things that are just fated in time travel movies.
Yeah. So I loved him running back to Rachel McAdams.
I think any worse movie, and like to speak to Tim's credit, he does do shitty things, but this could have been the shittiest thing he does. Mm-hmm. He could sleep with her, rewind time, get his kicks off, like be with Margot Robbie once, and then it's gone forever. He can get rid of all evidence of that. But in this moment, you know, we get the fate. He realizes what, you know, I've, as a critic, have been realizing this entire time. Like, no, you are meant for this person. Go back to them. So I wanted to defend Tim a little bit after the steal your girl moment earlier, and
Yeah, and I think that he really truly does the right thing kind of throughout this experience, which is he has a nice time, you know, with a friend, right? And he is a gentleman and walks her back home, and he says, "Nice catching up with you," and leaves, right? Yep. And he doesn't make it a thing. He doesn't make it weird. He doesn't make her feel bad, right? Mm-hmm. He just knows where he has to be.
Yeah, he's in a tough situation, but he gets out of there. He gets out of there with his honor and integrity intact.
Yeah, and we like him more for it.
Yeah.
Yep.
And he goes back home and sort of tries to wake her wake her up, but she's still sleepy, to propose to her, and it doesn't really work.
She's too sleepy.
She's too sleepy.
Which-
Sleepy.
Hard-
Too eepy.
Hard relate to trying to tell my wife how much I love her, and she's like, I'm too sleepy, go away.
He goes back in time to do it again and kind of wakes her up a little bit more gently, and there's this soft music playing in the background. And she says yes, and she's like, I'm glad that you did it this way, and it wasn't some big romantic gesture, this big public thing. And he goes, I'm just going to go turn the radio off. And he sneaks into the next room, and there's the band from the bar that he went to with Margot Robbie. So I'm wondering if he went back in time before he met up with Margot Robbie to just went to that bar and asked the band to come play.
Oh yeah, I didn't think
And Rory's also there with a bottle of champagne. So I'm wondering if he just wiped the whole awkward Margot Robbie thing from the timeline completely.
right, maybe.
And he asked them to leave, and it's a very funny and cute moment.
It is a very funny. I laughed really hard at that visual gag of the band being there and him being like, please leave.
And now Tim and Mary go to meet his parents. There's a nice moment with Mary and his mom on the beach where his mom asks Mary her weaknesses, and they have a very nice little back and forth where I can't remember everything that they say, but she says something like, I have a weakness for your son, and she says, I do too, but don't let him know that, or don't let it get to his head, or something like that. Very cute moment. The mom gives a really good performance, again played by, let me look at my notes here, Lindsay Duncan. She's really good in this movie. Just kind of lost in a sea of other really good performances that stand out, I think.
Yeah. And so we're seeing Rachel McAdams interact with basically Tim's whole family. She seems to get along with all of them very well. Like, she has that nice little moment with Tim's mom. Tim's sister, Kit Kat, basically immediately takes to Mary as like her favorite person in the world. There's like a very immediate, strong bond there, which is very cute and very endearing.
And we should note here that I think at this point Kit Kat had moved to London and has come back and is in a bit of a rough patch with Jimmy. Again, something that's more in the background at this point of the film.
Yeah, the movie does a pretty good job of reminding you of this consistently, but keeping it kind of to the periphery, where it's like you kind of get the sense that things are not going well in Kit Kat's life, but it's never brought to the forefront. Yeah.
And at dinner one night, Tim announces to the family that they're getting married and that Mary is also pregnant.
Which is information that we, the viewers, learned in this scene. I was like, oh, she is?
Yeah.
We learned it at the same time Tim's family does.
Yeah, well, when you have unlimited cum powers, I think it's kind of inevitable.
Yeah.
And
he's
then, at the
eventually
dinner,
he's going to
we
go
get-
back and be like, I'm not wrapping it up this time. Sorry, Dennis.
No, you're fine. Get the bit out. And here we get the excellent Uncle Desmond bit again, where he's like, "Oh, who's pregnant?" Right after the announcement, he talks to Mary, and then he's talking to Mary. He's like, "Oh, congratulations. Who's the father?" With Tim right across the table from him, and just like, gotta love Uncle Duncan.
Which, okay, so Dennis, I think this is a good time because we sort of it seemed like we're maybe on the same page about this. And this is a good time to talk about Uncle Desmond. So I have a theory because he's a man in this family, right? And I think he's Bill Nighy's brother, right?
No, he's the mom's brother.
Oh, okay. So he doesn't have the time travel.
No.
Damn it. Okay. I had a theory about him, which is
Okay.
and that's just because I mistook which side of the family he was on.
Yeah.
But I was like, I think this guy has time traveled so much that he doesn't know where or when he is at any given time. I think it's like his brain is broken by too much time travel, but that goes out the window because he doesn't have that.
Yeah.
thing. Never mind.
Yeah, I kind of thought that too, but I did watch this movie twice, and the second time I was like, oh no, he's not part of that.
Well,
that
there
side of
goes
the
that
family.
theory.
Yeah.
I thought I really had something there.
But I will be bringing up this continual joke, because this is a joke that's happened a lot. When we cut to Uncle Desmond, he doesn't know what's going on, and
Yeah.
then later in the movie, it really matters for me. So I want to bring it up so I can bring it up later.
Agreed.
I think we are back at their apartment at this point. I can't remember exactly, but there's a moment where Rachel McAdams is like, we have to plan this wedding. I will take off one item of clothing for every decision that you make.
This scene's really cute.
It's very cute.
Yeah.
And he fumbles it on picking a best man because the only ideas he has are Jay, his shitty friend, not shitty friend, but his
Sort of
lifelong childhood friend who's
Yeah.
kind of an asshole. Rory, the awkward, nervous pushover from his work, and Harry, played by Tom Hollander, who is a drunken wreck. So he lands on Rory and decides that Rory will be his best man. And we montage through their wedding, and it's a really wonderful, lovely scene. It's set to this like funny Italian song that he and his dad like, and there's this joke where she's like, why do I have to walk down the aisle to this? They leave the wedding chapel, and it's raining, and it knocks the tents over, but they're all laughing and having a good time.
Yeah, it's like so windy and so rainy, just like the exact weather that you don't want on your wedding day, right? And it's such a cute, like, wonderful montage. It's like so beautiful.
And they end up in his parents' house afterwards, and what I like is that it's implied that he doesn't change anything about the wedding other than the best man speech, which is coming up. Every time he goes back in time, the wedding is still just rainy and windy, and he has a good time with it. I think this a theme that emerges in this movie is about appreciating every day for the little moments and kind of rolling through the tough times and the imperfections. And this is a really good encapsulation of that theme before it emerges more obviously in the text.
Yeah.
It's really nice and sweet.
So then
And
we
I
do
liked
get
it
to
a
the
lot.
best man speeches.
We get to the best man speeches, which
And-
are hilarious.
And Rory
Yeah.
fucking fumbles it so bad. This is not a guy that you want to be in charge of any kind of public speaking. So Tim's like, fuck, I guess I gotta try. I don't remember whether he tries Harry or Jay next, but
He tries Harry next. I
Yeah.
believe.
And Harry is basically like being crass, and the crowd is like shocked, right? And then he tries Jay, and then Jay is like, I'm gonna take this whole crowd through every single woman that Tim has ever had sexual activity with, and I'm gonna tell you exactly which base they got to.
He has a projector and a screen and a full-ass PowerPoint presentation.
Which honestly, I feel like, so ultimately this is not what Tim does, but I feel like I'd be like, maybe keep Jay. I don't know. This seems
Yeah,
entertaining.
that's like a solid out of the three. I would take the J one because like the crowd was kind of into it. Like there was even a girl in the wedding party who was like got a blowjob via the text of like connecting the numbers. He starts describing like, oh, a 5 is a blowjob, 8 is like full.
And when they cut to a reaction shot of Rachel McAdams, I don't even think she looks upset. She kind of looks like she's like having fun. So I was like, I don't know, maybe leave this one. But he is embarrassed. So then instead, he goes to a choice that he hadn't considered, which is his dad, which is so sweet.
Yeah, his dad gives a very nice, sweet little speech.
Yeah.
And at the end, they're talking about it together, and he's like, "I didn't say that I loved you."
Mm-hmm.
And this is the only time I think we see time travel from someone else's perspective, from his dad's perspective. his dad goes back to say, I've only loved 3 men in my life, B.B. King, Uncle Desmond, and my son. And it's really nice. It's a really nice little moment.
Because there is this, like, you notice with the family, it is that, like, conservative British, like, I will not say I love you, but I will show you I love you. Like, it is very clear this is an extremely loving family. But they pick at each other the entire time, and, like, there's a joke from the mom I love later in the movie about Tim when he's born, and she's just absolutely ripping on him without, like, the sense of sarcasm. Like, it feels genuine, but this family loves each other despite all the, like, the quips back to each other. And this is, like, the first honest moment. There's even, like, a recurring thing between Bill Nighy and Domhnall Gleeson of, like, they don't show that affection. And every time Bill Nighy wants to, it's there's a hug, a kiss, like, and I think it's just, like, the full walls break down for this moment that I really love.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a family where, like, sarcasm and mockery are, like, their main love languages. So when you get Bill Nighy actually saying, like, I love you to his son, it, like, means more, you know?
Oh my God, he loves him.
I know. He loves his dad, and his dad loves him.
Loves his dad.
Yeah, so his dad goes back and fixes the speech.
We do get another scene here of Kit Kat bringing up Jimmy sort of offhandedly or as a bit of an aside to Uncle Desmond. He says something like, when's your next, or when's your turn to get married? And she says, boys aren't very nice. And we see Jimmy, and this is the first time we really, the camera's really focused on Jimmy, and he's at the party kind of chatting up another girl while he's there with Kit Kat, who's his girlfriend. So we know this dude's bad news at this point.
Yeah, and it's never really clear exactly what is happening in Jimmy and Kit Kat's relationship, but we know it's not good. And I kind of like that the movie doesn't dwell on it too much. It kind of lets that be like a dark corner that we don't really explore.
We're about to explore it a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
It gets straight into it right after that.
Yeah. Rachel McAdams and Domhnall Gleeson have their first baby named Posey, and they move into a new house. And they're having... Again, it's another kind of montage of them through the pregnancy and birth, and we end up at a party that they're having with some of their friends, and Jimmy shows up to the party, knocks on the door, and Kit Kat hasn't arrived, and it's like, where's Kit Kat? They had a fight that morning. They were drunk. And she left first and hasn't arrived, and that's because she's been in a car accident.
Yeah, because she was drinking and driving.
And she's in the hospital. She's just in the hospital. And Tim decides to... Let me see here. Make sure I get my order of events right.
I'm pretty sure the next thing that happens is Tim decides that in order to prevent this... he needs to tell Kit Kat about the time travel and get her to go back in time to never meet the first thing he does is try to prevent the car accident.
Yeah,
right?
he goes back in time to pick her up.
Right.
And take her to the party, and she's drunk. And Kit Kat says something to him about being like, every family has a person who just falls off. Like, maybe she is just the fuck up of the family.
The faller. Yeah.
So Tim tells her his secret, and they go back together, and she sort of holds on to him while he does the time travel thing. Goes back to the New Year's party to make sure that
all the things she said.
Coming out of my cage, and I've been doing just fine.
Make sure that she never meets Jimmy. She shows up, and Jimmy's kissing some other girl. Kit Kat walks up to him and just socks him in the fucking face, which kind of rules.
It's very funny. And he's like, do I know you?
And as they're leaving, Bill Nighy kind of looks at them like, oh, this is a time travel thing going on here.
Yeah.
Like, he knows what's going on.
Yeah, which is very funny. And so then they go back to the present day, and Kit Kat realizes that, because I guess she like gets her memories from the alternate timeline, and she realizes that she is with Jay, Tim's kind of asshole friend, who's less of an asshole than Jimmy, right? And she's like, "Oh, I'm with Jay," right? And Tim's like, "Oh, Jay, you said he looked like a Muppet," which I thought was funny.
Yeah, this is a part in the movie where the time travel rules are really fast and loose.
Yeah. But anyway, so she's like now in the present in a nice relationship with Jay, and we're like, "Oh, well, this is fixed," until Tim goes back. He's like back in his living room or whatever, and his kid runs up to him, and it's a different child. It is not Posey. It is a little British boy. Which I think this reaction from him is so funny. This got a big laugh out of me, where he's like, "Hello, boy." Because he's like, "Where is my daughter? What the hell?" And instead of probably what I would do in the situation, which is like, I don't know, it's a fucking kid. It's
deal
they're
with
interchangeable. Instead, he has a big problem with this, I guess, and decides that he cannot, in fact, undo his daughter and replace her with a son for whatever reason. And talks to Bill Nighy about it, and Bill Nighy's like, "Oh yeah, I probably should have told you this, but this is actually a really important part of it, which is that," and this is maybe the craziest thing in this movie, maybe the wildest thing in this movie. If you go back before a child's birth, a different sperm may fertilize the egg, and you end up with a different kid.
I mean, it could have been any
Could have
sperm.
been any of the swimmers.
Any of them coming out of that flamethrower of a cock.
So I guess
that night that they fucked.
So I guess like just the act of you going back in time just makes some of your boys edge ahead of the other ones, right? Who knows why, right? But I do think it's very funny that in this scene we do get Bill Nighy saying the words, "It must be the exact sperm."
Yeah. Domhnall Gleeson's got a stockpile like North Korea down there. It could have been any of them.
So that is why his child has transformed, and he decides that he apparently can't do that. So he undoes, right, what we just did with having Kit Kat never get together with Jimmy, because if he goes back that far, he won't have Posey, and instead she just does get in the car accident, right?
And this is kind of the highest stakes thing that happens in this movie. You know, it's never like, and even then it's like, it's not that Kit Kat's going to die. She's just kind of beaten up in this accident. And I was wondering how well it works for you guys. I think it works for me. I like that it is, again, a bit of a theme emerging here where time travel's not an easy fix. Sometimes you're just going to have to work through the hard stuff on your own. And in this case, he's going to have to help Kit Kat rebuild her life after this accident. So I was wondering how well it worked for you guys as far as some real emotional, dramatic stakes in this otherwise kind of silly and cute time travel romantic comedy.
Yeah, I think it worked just as well for me, because like I've been noticing, the fate that goes around for this, and it is a come to Jesus moment when it comes to Jimmy for Kit Kat. Like, it is either go back and erase everything, and then Domhnall Gleeson does like the one, I mean, besides ruining that man's life and getting back with Rachel McAdams, does the like one selfish thing and be like, I do love my daughter and don't want a different gendered child. But he makes the decision that like, we're gonna have to fix this by either making sure it didn't happen or letting this rock bottom be the way we build you up from here, and makes that tough decision. And it's just it's a heart-wrenching scene for me. It really hits hard. Of just like, sometimes the bad thing has to happen.
Yeah, I think this does work for me as well. I think that even though it's like relatively low stakes, because it's always clear that she's gonna be fine. She's gonna physically recover. The thing that is at stake here, more than her physical well-being, is she is losing hope that her life is ever going to be better, right? And that is a thing that is really hard for Tim, and also something that, again, as a viewer, I feel like I can relate to. I have a younger sister, you know, she's 16 years old. She's about to start making her own mistakes in life. You know, she probably is, and I don't know anything about them yet. And this scene was hit really hard for me, because I was like, yeah, like, people that you love, you have to let make their own mistakes. And the hardest part is to see them wanting to give up, right? Which is kind of what's happening here. And what he can't use time travel to magically fix, right, is to get her to believe that her life can be better, right? And that she's not just the faller, the failure of the family, right? Which is, so it really worked for me too.
I hate to bring this up again, but this is the dark flash moment again of the film, where like, this is the moment, you know, we can't win this fight, so we have to let it happen. And Flash reference.
Although he does use some time travel informed stuff to sort of help her along, because as they're like in the hospital with her, helping her get through this, like when they're going to leave finally, he is kind of like, hey, have you ever considered going out with Jay? Which it's funny because, like, obviously we know that relationship is going to work out because we saw that timeline, but Kit Kat doesn't know about it. And so she's like, I think this is where she says he looks like a Muppet. She's like, he looks like a Muppet. Right. And he's like, well, you never know. Like, he's always been into you. Maybe give it a shot or whatever. And then, yeah, we kind of, we sort of flash forward here. Right. And she does get out of the hospital and kind of turn her life around. Yeah. She decides, without having her timeline changed, that she's going to break up with Jimmy and that she's going to stop drinking, right? Yeah. And she does end up going out with Jay. And I think somewhere in here, Mary and Tim also have like another kid. A second kid. Yeah,
Tim comes home after... One thing I wanted to add about the Kit Kat scene before we move on is I like that Tim and Mary are sitting next to Kit Kat's hospital bed, and they're like, we're not going to leave until you own up to this. And they're not judgmental or anything. They're not harping on her about it. They're just sitting and waiting. And she's finally like, I have to break up with Jimmy, right? I'm like, yep, that's it. It's really sweet and nice that they're like, that she makes that choice and they don't force it on her.
No, she had to get there on her own.
Right. So Tim comes home from the hospital for the first time and is really excited and runs in the door to see if it's the same kid, and it's Posey, it's his daughter again. And immediately fueled by that threat of potentially losing his daughter, he's like, we got to have another one.
I need another one. Another one. And so he to Rachel McAdams is like, let's have another one. And she's like, no, that hurt. Right. But he gets really excited about it. She sees how excited he is about it. And eventually she's like, all right. Right. And so they have another kid. In here somewhere, Kit Kat and Jay get together, so we kind of see that like things are going good. She's in a relationship with Jay that's like more healthy and positive for her, and you know, Tim's got his little family. And I think this here with the two kids, yes, is where sort of the next comedic set piece that happens is the dress try-on montage with Rachel McAdams.
Yeah, she has some kind of event that she's going to, and she has a manuscript that she's edited. I don't think she's written it. I think it's just something that she's edited.
Yeah. It's something that her publishing house is like acquiring the rights to or whatever.
So she asked Domhnall Gleeson to help her try on dresses, and every dress he's like, yes, it's gorgeous, it's amazing.
It's kind of a classic rom-com moment.
And he's like, okay, yeah, it sucks. And this is when I realized that like the key to a good relationship is just yes-anding your girlfriend.
Correct. Correct. You have to be on board for all of the bits always. Mm-hmm. That is the key to a successful relationship. Is you can, if they come at you with the energy where they're wanting to get your opinion on something, if they're coming at you, you just have to meet them where they're at. You can't bring the energy down.
Right. Meanwhile, while this is happening, Posey has destroyed the manuscript with crayons and ripped it up and stuff.
And put it through the paper shredder, which Tim has a funny line about that, where he's like, I didn't even know she had to use that, and it's actually kind of impressive if you think about it.
In the middle of this, Rachel McAdams gets a call, and it's turns out that Bill Nighy has cancer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you as the viewer are kind of, I think, intentionally faked out here to think that he has already died, but he has not. He's just been diagnosed, right? And so I also we're talking about this movie for so long. This is going to be such a long episode, but I do want to spend just a second talking about this moment where the manuscript gets trashed, and she is mad at Rachel McAdams. Mary is mad at Tim about it. Right. Because he was supposed to, I think, have shut the door to her office where the manuscript was. And so they're having a little bit of a fight. It's not like too heated, but she is like very legitimately upset about this, and for good reason. And Tim is trying to get out of the room so that he can go time travel and fix it. And she's not letting him leave the room because she's like, no, we're not done having this conversation. Like, you're going to stay here and we're going to talk about this. And so he's trying to like escape to fix it, and she won't let him. And then it gets interrupted by this call about Bill Nighy having cancer. And as far as we know, he never goes back and fixes the manuscript, right? It's just he allows it to be ruined because a bigger thing came up, right? And his energy shifts from this small problem to this bigger problem. And I think that is such like a nice moment in this movie where it's like, oh, even though he has this ability to go back and fix things in his own life, there are moments that even though he could fix, he like doesn't, because something bigger is going on, because someone that he loves needs him, and he's not thinking about the manuscript anymore, right? And I just thought it was like a very good, I like that sequence a lot. Everything from them starting the fight about the manuscript all the way through them going to see his dad after his diagnosis. I was like, that is a very strong moment in this movie for me, like as far as the metaphor of the whole thing. But yeah, so then they go to visit his parents after his dad's diagnosis. And his mom opens the door, and I love his mom's line here, which I didn't write down exactly, so I'll be paraphrasing. But basically, she's like, I think Mary asks how she's doing, and she's like, I'm furious. I have no interest in a life without your father, which I'm just like, my fucking heart, man. Like, oh my God.
Uncle Desmond also drives the knife to my heart next. And
this is the point I've been wanting to.
Yeah, I'll set it up and then pitch it to you, Dennis. Tim walks in, asks how Uncle Desmond's doing, and Uncle Desmond's like, I'm doing lovely. Your father, not so much. And he mentions that the wedding was the best day of his life because Tim's dad told him that he loved him. So I guess this is probably the worst day of my life. And my little heart broke. So Dennis, take it from here, please.
It's not only that, like, the emotion of the scene, and it is fully double layered for me. Like, that line hits so hard. But this is a character you've seen essentially out of the plot the entire time. He's always out of it. And this is fully somber. This is the most concurrent lines he has together. And like all of it, like whatever is going on with Uncle Desmond, whatever neurotypicalness is going on with him, this moment has like sobered that enough that this is the thing he cares about most. He's so locked into this moment.
Yeah.
Fucking heartbreaking.
Yeah. And it's a extra powerful moment because previously he's kind of been played for comedy, right?
Yep.
Where it's like, oh, he kind of doesn't, he's kind of like, his head's in the clouds. He's a little spacey or whatever. And so to have that moment from his character just means even more, right? And then Tim goes to see his dad, right? And they have a conversation about all of this.
Yeah, and his dad's kind of playing that strong male figure, like he is about the emotional moments, the intimacy with his family, where he's kind of just shrugging it off like it's no big deal. I can't believe you came. And he's like, I got weeks left to live. and owns up to it. And
it is lung cancer from his smoking.
Yes.
Which he does make a little joke about, where he's like, "But I don't regret it because your mother probably never would have married me if I wasn't such a sexy smoker."
And he can't go back and change it because he wouldn't have his family.
Right.
Tim reveals that his father tells him the second big secret in monologue, in voiceover, and I wish that it had just been in this. We had remained in the scene with Bill Nighy as he says this, but we transition to another montage from here, where the second big secret to life is to just live your life day to day, and not worry about time travel to fix the mistakes, and then go back and live it again and appreciate those things that you missed the first time around, with all the tension and the stress of the day resolved because you've already gone through it.
Which this is the clearest point in this movie where the time travel is like a metaphor, and it's like not actually to be taken at like face value in the script, because it's like Bill Nighy's whole point here is basically like go through the day once, experiencing all the negative emotions, then go through it again and don't change anything, right? Which basically negates anything that we would think about with time travel, right? Nobody thinks about time travel as like, oh, just go live a day again exactly the way you lived it, right? Because it's like, for this movie, the point is it's about experiencing your life in the moment and being present, right? And the time travel is a device here that's used to communicate that idea of like, just while you're living, just be present, right? And be with the people that you love and live your life and experience all of these moments as they happen to you, right?
Yeah, and I think there's some
caught up in your own thoughts and memories. Sorry.
No, you're fine. I think there's a really good subtle moment of great directing in this montage, because we're getting a lot of bits, like he's playing up all this shitty things that has happened in his life now that he's gone through the day the second time. But in the first go through, he grabs a quick sandwich from a little store, pays, and leaves. And then the second go through, the camera switches perspective, so we actually see the woman who is taking his order. We see that she's like actually a very attractive woman, but like he's just taking in the note of like actually acknowledging this person that he like had a second with.
Yeah, because the first time around, she's like being really friendly and trying to be really nice to him, and he's rushed. He just wants to pay and leave.
Yeah, and to Dennis's point, it's an over-the-shoulder shot over her shoulder, and you don't see her face. Yeah. You only see him, right? Yeah.
And then the second time around, you see her.
And they're having like banter and being polite and connecting as human beings.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like a part in this montage as well where he has a subway ride home after this long, stressful day, and there's a guy sitting next to him with his headphones too loud, playing rock music. And at the first time, Domhnall Gleeson's just tired and kind of annoyed.
Yeah,
and then
like,
the second time,
this asshole's shitty music or whatever.
Yeah, and then the second time, Domhnall Gleeson's just kind of jamming out to it, very like
he's like doing air guitar.
Yeah. It's a nice little sweet montage, and the score is really good here too. We've talked a lot about the needle drops, and Dennis brought up the score, but this is a good spot where the score really shines through.
Yeah.
And again, it's a theme kind of finally emerging, not emerging, but really like coalescing at this sort of final stretch of the movie, and then he ends this voiceover through this montage talking about there are some days where you only want to go through them once. And it's Daddy's funeral, and Nick Cave's Into My Arms is playing. And if you want to make me a blubbering, disgusting mess, just play Into My Arms by Nick Cave. Because I was crying my fucking eyes out during this part.
This is actually not the moment where I was a full blubbering mess, but we're almost there.
I mean,
I do love that Nick Cave song, though.
It's about 70% Nick Cave in this moment is making me cry, to be fair. But it's a really good scene and a really nice emotional scene at this part in the movie where they're back at Tim's parents' house and it's the funeral, and kind of everyone's getting ready to come in to go do the funeral. Basically, they're all coming downstairs and they're dressed, and Tim steps into his dad's office for one moment to go back in time and have a chat with his dad. And his dad is like, "Where you come from?" And he knows that it's
his funeral,
the day of his funeral.
And his dad's like, "Oh, it's the day, isn't it?" And he's like, "Yeah." And so, is this? I'm getting the sequence of things in this mixed up. This isn't when they go back again yet, right? No, it's not.
No, that's later.
So this is just them having a conversation it's him and his dad having a conversation on the day that his dad died.
Yeah.
Right. And it's very sweet and very sad.
And I think from here we go to the decision to have a third kid.
Yes.
And Rachel McAdams brings it up this time.
Which I think is important. It's a thing that she wants, right? And what we know is if they do have this kid, right, then that means Tim's never going to be able to go back in time and see his dad again, because if he goes back to before the kid was born, he will end up with a different kid, and apparently that's a problem for him. So for the purposes of the movie, this is an unstoppable decision, right? And so he initially sort of is not sure if he wants to let go of his dad. But it's really clear to me in this moment, he's seeing how much Mary wants this. And he drops all of his hesitation and he's like, yeah, let's do it. Right. Because he loves her so much and he wants this because she wants this. Right. And I think that that's very beautiful and very sweet. So, because he knows that once the kid is born, right, he's not going to see his dad again. We kind of flash forward and she's like very, very pregnant, like almost due. Right. And he's like, there's something I got to do. Will you excuse me for a second? And he goes into a dark place, time travels and goes back to his dad. And him and his dad have a conversation where basically he's like, you know, we're going to have another kid. And his dad understands because his dad's a time traveler too. He's like, understands what this means, which is that this is it. This is their like actual last goodbye. And Tim, I think, asks his dad if there's anything that he wants to do. He does give him a kiss too, which I think is very sweet. A little kiss on the cheek here, which his dad, Bill Nighy, is like very resistant to. He's like, he was like, a kiss. And he's like, well, it's the last time. And he's like, okay. And then he asks Bill Nighy if there's anything that he wants to do. And he says, I'd like to go for a walk. Right. And then they go back in time. And this is technically the largest plot hole in the movie.
But he does say, if we're very
as long
careful,
as they do everything the
we
same.
do everything right, which I don't know how you remember that.
Right.
They go back to when Tim was a little boy.
It's technically a huge plot hole, but I don't give a shit because I am fucking weeping
Everyone's
my
bawling.
eyes out.
Yeah, we're all
Oh
crying.
My God.
Yeah.
They go down to the beach to kind of skip stones together.
I'm going to cry right now talking about it.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Like I said, this is the point in the move where I'm like, this is where the payoff comes. You're ugly crying now. Like, oh, it's okay. I know. I cried so hard at this moment too.
Yeah. And it's so emotional because they go back in time together to Tim and his dad when Tim is like a little kid and they're just having a walk on the beach, and it's set to this really emotional music. And I just love my dad so much, you guys. And this made me want to spend more time with my dad.
Yeah. From here, we kind of montage through the end. So a few things happen here. Kit Kat has had a baby with Jay, and Tim mentions, now that he's had his third kid, he doesn't go through. He doesn't use his time travel powers anymore.
Mm-hmm. He sort of decides that he can do the thing that his dad advised him to do, which is really live in the moment and be present. He's kind of decided he can do that without living the day twice. Yeah. He can just do it the first time. Which is really, that's the point of the movie. right? Like this is the thesis of the entire movie is basically like live as if you had the ability to redo things, right? But do it the way that you would want to do it on repeat the first time.
And I think like the message of just live your life day to day is kind of simple and trite, but this movie does a very good job conveying that message in a way that another movie, a lesser movie, that message would come across as just very simple and cheap and thrown in there.
Yeah, and I think what makes it work is the high concept like time travel device of it, right? Because you need the kind of magical realism element to make such an old and simple theme feel really fresh and prescient, right? And I think it does that really well.
Yeah. There's a sequence where he's spending the morning with his kids, getting them ready for school and cooking breakfast. And he says in voiceover, like, we're all traveling through time together, and all we can do is just like treasure these moments that we share together on this ride. And it's really sweet, and I am still crying. I've been crying since Nick Cave started playing maybe 15 minutes ago in this movie, and I'm still crying.
Yeah. And I'm sitting on my couch trying, like, with my hand clasped over my mouth, trying to cry as quietly as possible because my wife is asleep in a house, and I don't want to be like in the other room and wake her up being like, "Are you dying?"
And we also montage with scenes from other characters in the movie. There's a scene where Harry stumbles out of a shop with a drink and tosses it in a can, and he makes it, and he throws his hands up in the air. Other kind of extras and other characters around like this park. And the movie ends.
That's the end of the movie.
So that's about time.
That's about time from 2013.
Dennis, being our guest, the first guest in the history of the Greatest Movie Ever Made podcast, I will let you do the honors. Dennis, is About Time the greatest movie ever made?
About Time is definitely the greatest movie ever made.
Wow. Do you want to add any like final thoughts there?
I didn't mention this until now. I watched the movie right before we started recording. Just so my notes were as fresh as possible. And watching through this movie and taking the notes, I haven't mentioned this entire time, but I realized this very nice theme. There's a line in the very beginning after Bill Nighy tells Tim about time travel. Tim says, "It's going to be a complicated year." And Bill Nighy responds with, "It's a complicated life." And I started thinking about, we see, basically Tim's entire love life throughout this whole thing. But it does feel like a year, and this movie encapsulates different seasons. When we have the young romance with Margot Robbie, we're in spring. When he finally meets Rachel McAdams, we hit summer. Once we have the big drop with Kit Kat, we're in winter or fall. And then once we get the cancer diagnosis, we're in winter. And then as he starts to live his life again, we're back in spring. Everything's regrowing again. The characters come anew in the whole year. Yeah, I went.
And the movie starts on New Year's, Dennis.
Yep, exactly.
Holy shit.
I know. So there's just so many things in this movie that work so well that, any other movie just does not get right. Nothing feels like this movie to me.
Yeah. All right. Well, David, you usually ask me first, but because we had a guest, we asked Dennis first. Do you have any questions for me?
Yeah. Justus.
Yes.
Is About Time the greatest movie ever made?
David and Dennis. Dennis, thank you for bringing this movie to us.
Yes,
I
absolutely.
probably never would have watched this movie in my whole life if we hadn't had you as a guest on this podcast. So, thank you for picking this, and thank you for bringing this to my attention, because it was totally not on my radar. This is a movie that I think is very, very funny. I think it's very emotional, very heartfelt. I think it is packed wall to wall with incredible performances. We sort of stopped talking about how fucking funny and amazing Harry is in this movie. Just the best character that's ever been in any rom-com of all time. Bill Nighy tears my fucking heart out of my chest every single time he's on screen with just how emotional he is and the gravitas that he brings. Domhnall Gleeson is so charming. Rachel McAdams is one of my favorite actresses of all time, and she is so delightful in this role. I have not seen a lot of rom-coms. I'm not a big rom-com guy. I'm going to say that this has the distinguished honor of, for me, being the greatest rom-com ever made. And I know that the point of the podcast is greatest movie ever made. So for these the purposes of this podcast, let's just say, yes, it is the greatest movie ever made because it's the greatest rom-com ever made. It's the greatest movie of its ilk ever made, ergo, the greatest movie ever made. David.
I don't know how I feel about that. I think we'll have to just totally rethink the structure of this podcast.
I'm already fucking it up, and we're only 5 episodes.
5 episodes, and we have to start from the beginning. We have to burn it all down.
Okay, you know what? I'm not going to try and make this more complicated than it needs to be. It's always been a binary choice. That's the conceit of the podcast. I have had 2 beers and had a long conversation about a very emotional movie.
A wonderful conversation.
I almost started crying just thinking about the movie. It's the greatest movie ever made.
Okay.
David is About Time from 2013, the greatest movie ever made.
Thank you for asking me, Justus.
I would never imagine
and reorienting the ship.
Never imagined that I would be asking you that question, but here I am.
Dennis, thank you so much for guesting on this podcast. We'll give you a moment to plug your lovely show as well in a minute here. Thank you for bringing this movie to us, because I like movies where people get their guts ripped out by zombies.
That is my favorite kind of movie.
And their heads blown off by shotguns. So I probably never would have watched this. I wholeheartedly recommend this movie, especially if you are an ornery, angry bastard like us who just watches trash. I think
guess what? We have feelings too.
Yeah.
Who would have thought?
This is so sweet and charming and fun, with a poignant message and great moments. Great performances. I do not think it is the greatest movie ever made. It gets very close for me. That's why I watched it twice, because the first time I watched it without taking notes and really, really liked it. The second time I wanted to actually have notes so I'd be prepared for the podcast.
Are
but
you
also
saying the film had such a profound effect on you that you took a lesson from the film of watching the movie once without fucking, with just living it out, and then going again to notice the little things?
So
You're
profound.
Still gonna say this isn't the greatest movie ever made?
It was such a profound,
Drag him, Dennis.
profound thing that
Drag his ass.
I started the movie without notes. I was anticipating the theme of the movie. I started the movie just like, I'm going to appreciate this for the little things. And then it happened in the movie. I was like, oh, I was right. So, yeah, I do not think this is the greatest movie ever made. Damn. It is very good. It is very sweet, very charming. Definitely, I think, although it was relatively successful, underseen, underappreciated. Please watch it with your significant other. Please watch it if you are single and you want to feel sad and regretful about all of the relationships that have failed in your life.
And definitely steal Dennis's move of deploying this as part of your game in like a new relationship on maybe like a second or third date or something. Just, get him crying on your couch and swoop in for a little bit of comfort.
So that closes the podcast. Dennis, let the people out there know where they can find you, what you have going on in your life, and all about your podcast.
Yeah, most definitely. I worked on a tabletop role-playing game podcast where we would try out different systems, because there's just more than Dungeons and Dragons out there. It's super popular. Wizards of the Coast suck. So try to find things made by people of different ilk and different voices that were not usually held at the table. So if you liked my voice, you want to see what stories I was able to create with some really good friends of mine, you can check out CTRL Group, CTRL, just like the key on your keyboard, so we can find a system for you.
Yeah, and I would highly recommend, if you're going to go over and listen to CTRL Group from this episode of Greatest Movie Ever Made, a good place to start on their podcast is the It Came From Lake Mary series. I did give that a listen, and it is greatly enjoyable and entertaining, even to someone like me who does not play tabletop RPGs and basically has like no knowledge of tabletop gaming. You can still get into it because really what they're doing is telling a story. So
yeah, thank you for that plug. I would even say we do have a short series where we play a game in which you're making a Hallmark Christmas movie.
Oh, hell yeah.
So that was the whole thing. So we do have a rom-com episode. So if you want more rom-com, where I drew a lot of inspiration from, was from About Time.
Hell yeah. I'll have to give those episodes a listen. I haven't listened to those ones yet.
Thank you again, Dennis. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Over here at The Greatest Movie Ever Made, we are about to kick off a month of horror movie programming for Halloween. We are starting it off with John Carpenter's underseen, underappreciated horror classic,
masterpiece,
Prince of Darkness,
it's
from 1987.
Yeah, we already recorded this episode, and just prepare for some tension next week on this podcast.
I think it's one of our most entertaining episodes so far.
Prepare for 2 hours of me screaming at David. So yeah, that's it for this week. Dennis, do you want to join us in our little sign off? Sorry,
yeah, I've
David,
definitely made it through an entire episode of your show, so I know what it is.
Oh, hell yeah. All right. Well, this has been another episode of The Greatest Movie Ever Made. Later dipshits. We hope you enjoyed this episode of The Greatest Movie Ever Made. Please remember to leave us a rating and a review, and to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. We appreciate you supporting the show and spreading the word. Tell your friends to listen, tell your enemies to listen, tell your mom to listen. If your neighbor has an unsecured Bluetooth speaker, connect to it and play an episode. You can follow us on social media at TGMEM_podcast, and if you've got a movie that you want us to talk about, send us an email at thegreatestmoviepodcast@gmail.com.